See here. I guess we'll do an intro. What's up? This is Chris, and we
And
got
Kevan.
Kevin, and we're back again with Leiland and Guatemax to learn more about what do you call it? The cosmology? No, cosmism.
I call it Cosmism. It's a cooler. I mean, it's an ism to fight the other isms. So I mean, that can be redundant for people. But
Nice.
Hugh Nibley called it restored Cosmism. So that's what I continue to
Oh,
riff
really?
on that. Yeah,
Oh,
and just before I forget, this is just an additional layer through which to again read and see and incorporate the gospel. I'm not saying like this is the only way to see it, but I'm saying this is why I called what I'm writing on my Substack the Cosmism Manifesto, is because I am out there just saying like, hey, incorporate this, add it, and watch how deep your roots of testimony will grow. That's it's not me saying, hey, the church needs to change and we need action and this and that. I'm like, no, this isn't for everybody. and that's what it's been from the beginning. So I don't want to come off as like, hey, I'm trying to rally everyone to believe the same way I do, because that's not the case at all. And in fact, I think a lot of people are not ready to handle this. That's why I've dialed back how much I'm out there like, hey, everybody look at these things, because you become more crazy to the people who already see you as crazy. And it helps the people who are interested, because they're like, when are you going to leave your next breadcrumb or whatever? But at the same time, there's more confusion if you're not entering in the straight way, like entering in the right way, building a foundation of knowledge and a perspective or paradigm, or as I've heard you guys refer to, like a lens, right, through which to see things, but doing it the right way. Because I agree with you that lenses that we get, perspectives, they should be temporary, not permanent. Or I can't remember what the saying was that I heard you guys say that I really resonated with.
Welded on lenses.
Yes. Yeah. Like strong opinions loosely held, right? To have that idea. And that's what this is. It's not that I'm saying if these things don't turn out right, what I'm putting out in my manifesto, then, everything crumbles before it. No, these are all a superstructure on an already found, like a solid foundation that everybody should have. But I'm realizing not everybody has that foundation. And I'm lamenting like Elder Oaks in a recent conference where he said, you know what? A lot of the gripes that people have about what the church is doing policy-wise is because they don't understand the plan of salvation. They don't understand where we are in the prophetic timeline, where we are on this big picture macroscape. They don't have the lens on. And so what do we have for the last how many conferences? It's just, I feel like a bombardment. And I am biased because I'm looking through this lens. But how many talks, if you go back and look, you're going to see that a lot of these talks and conferences are encouraging us to see things through a Christ-centered lens, to see things through an eternal perspective, to see things through this lens that is permanent. So I think when we're out in the world investigating ideas and ideologies and things like that, and we're talking philosophy, it's important to have strong convictions loosely held, like you said, or lenses that aren't permanent. But when it comes to the gospel, for me, there's no compromise. So I am fully aware that there are a lot of people who aren't members of the church who watch this, who might be very critical of what Leiland's presenting. I know from the beginning that I'm presenting something that is in a permanent lens, right? A taboo in terms of what we do when we go and explore philosophies and ideologies and things like that. That's the whole point. That's the whole message of my Cosmism Manifesto, is that, hey, when you adopt this eternal perspective, it's like dropping an anchor. It's like reaching up and grabbing the growing vine, like Jack and the Beanstalk, and going up to the land of the giants. Like it's grabbing that plumb line, the mountain, the temple, the pole, the iron rod, and sticking to that perspective. Yes, it's a foundation from which to fix this lens. So yeah, is my lens perfect? Probably not, right? I've got some tint on it that's going to help things and be how I've seen the world and how I've grown up through my experience. So it's going to be different for everybody else. If you go through my essays, though, so if I said, like, for example, I read some of the comments on the YouTube video from our last conversation, and it just feels like that word, foundation. We're not coming from the same foundation evaluating what we're talking about here with the kind of flack that I saw you guys getting, or even them throwing at me. Like, you're not understanding my position fundamentally to sit here and claim like, well, he's so biased and he's dangerous. Listen to him. He's so dangerous. Oh my gosh. It's like, give me a break. Give me a break. I'm admitting to you that I am looking through everything through this paradigm, assuming that the prophets are real and that God is real, and that what we believe when we put out 13 articles of faith, or the 10 commandments, or all the doctrine and covenants that we have, or these books that we say that we believe are scripture from God, I say, hey, let's look at the world, guys, believing that. And this is what I'm doing. So I understand that people who do not believe fundamentally in the claims of Joseph Smith and the Restoration are going to see this as absolutely crazy. And they're going to be like, oh my gosh, Chris, Kevin, I can't believe you'd have this lunatic on who's just spouting off this mind control garbage, and he's just so blind he can't see. whatever. Like
That's
they're misunderstanding the initial statement when I said
Well,
like
it's funny.
this is what I'm doing.
I just think it's funny when I got flack for it because I'm like, yeah, well, I'm a believer, so I see things like in a pretty similar light to Leiland does. So
well, I get flack because I'm supposed to challenge everything. Although if you go back to like a year ago, one of the first podcasts that Jared and I did was reviewing John DeLynn trying to talk with Rod Meldrum, and Rod Meldrum's what does he call it? Like the Central America, the Heartland theory
he's a
stuff.
Heartland,
and he couldn't get his ideas out at all because John DeLynn just had to sit there and virtue signal that I don't believe this and I think that you're bad and I think you're that sort of stuff, and it just was unlistenable, and we just were complete critics of it, and we called it like a struggle session. But beyond that, one of the other things that I've pulled up, I can even pull up some stuff just from Zelf on the Shelf yesterday. I was showing Kevan that they start talking about words or spells. They start saying things about Eckhart Tolle. They start saying things about what other sort of ideas like it's magic and all these sorts of things, and your magic of words can change the underlying without it. And you say, hey, you Bill Real and you different ex-Mormons, you guys start leaning into stuff and philosophies and theories that are the same branch. It's the exact same branch of the same stuff. So chill out when you're listening and hearing other people talk about it and see how they weave it in. One of the things that I do like, and I think we made that pretty clear last week, is how you situate it under some other traditional beliefs, so people can kind of go with layers of what's just kind of traditional and what's not. But it's not. One of the things I pointed out is it's not that wacky, like in the sense of tons of different people across tons of different traditions have pulled the stuff up and used it and thought it. And Kevin's used the concept before, which is something we 100% believe, is that all these sorts of things, religions, philosophies, and all that stuff, it's like a tool like fire. It can be dangerous, but it could also be helpful. But one of the main reasons we wanted to talk with you and we wanted to sort stuff out with Quaco, and we got interested listening with Guatemax and Jim, is because we thought there was absolute sort of smearing happening of claiming certain things are dangerous that are just not dangerous. They have a lot of history with them. They've been around and they've been with you forever, although I think you have a different way of situating it all. Because I'm not trying to denigrate that I think that you have a creative view of it. I'm not saying that you're not that you're not presenting something different or new. Well, but I mean, beyond that, like I don't want to say, hey, everybody else already said this. What I'm saying is there's a lot of different people using those strains and those thoughts of philosophy mixed with scripture and that sorts of stuff, but trying to situate it correctly and pull what's useful and pull in and leave behind what's not useful. What I'm saying is that it's all over the place. Everybody's doing it. Like I pointed out, Alan Moore super believes just in the theosophical Kabbalah side of stuff, like full religion, and people treat him like he's some rational atheist type, and you go, but that's no, that's full on. Even though it's just the Kabbalah, it's full on, like it's a full on belief system. Like, and you think Alan Moore, Watchmen, V for Vendetta, most of the Batman you got in Hades, that's all dangerous, super dangerous. Like the people who have these ideas, but Zelf on the Shelf pushing Eckhart Tolle comes, Meister, Eckhart, all that stuff comes from a Neoplatonism back to Aquinas and that sort of stuff. Like it's the same branch and the same thread, and how you situate it inside of your Mormonism to me is not at all crazy. It's 100% makes sense, and it makes it interesting. I also like how you situate it. And one of the things we were talking about with Quaku is how are you guys situated? We let Quaku speak his piece, although Guatemax has some opinions that she thinks he kind of gives it two different ways at two different times, depending on where he's at. But we let him say his piece on what it is. But the whole point was we knew that there was some battling going on and smearing going on just for some differences in these areas that all turns into dangerous. This is dangerous. Like the one thing we always point to is the Under the Banner of Heaven, what got all popularized. They push the slogan, this religion breeds dangerous men. And that whole entire thing, I have a belief that there is an intentional move to try to paint things that are not dangerous as something that must be feared, as if it were the Taliban or something, and it's a joke.
Well, I'd say also I would say in a Jordan Peterson way that there is danger there because it teaches you to be self-sufficient. It teaches, like, as far as like the religion goes, teaches you to be self-sufficient, but it also teaches you to be strong in your faith and in your convictions and in your commitment to freedom and things like that. And you just look at the angle that these shows and stuff are coming from. They're generally coming from an esoteric commie, perspective. So it's dangerous to that. Yeah, it looks like Leiland dropped out for a sec.
Looks like it popped off. Yeah, so not just to keep on ranting with that. Yeah, it's dangerous to those ideas, but like anything, as you said,
it's dangerous because it's the defense. Yeah. So they look at, hey, we're all we're trying to do is we're just trying to make it so you're defenseless,
There's I frequently bring up Wilfred Pareto, who we talk about it with the Pareto distribution, about where people try to lay at capitalism a problem with money that's not capitalism's fault. It's a thing that just happens in the universe. And that's just also true with beliefs and belief systems. And you can say stuff is dangerous or not. There's a lot of different people who argue all the way back to Nietzsche. It's like, is the belief prior to the action, or the action prior to the belief? Is the theory and that sort of philosophy all just post hoc description of what somebody just wanted to do because of power anyway? But I 100% get interested and just want to hear these ideas. And we're listening to Leiland the same way we said and listened to Kwaku talked about like reincarnation and a lot of different things. And I didn't sit there and say, Kwaku, there's no scientific proof. What are your sources on reincarnation? And it's true of all this other stuff. And we just spoke about where we're going to connect and agree and talk about that sorts of stuff. And we tried to give in the preamble, like I'm not here to do anything but learn what this belief system is that Guatemax told us is situated kind of interestingly, because we mentioned multiple times things like theosophy. Kevan and I have a skepticism of, just because we know of certain areas like in the UN and other areas that use it to one certain way, but anything can have a yin and a yang, and we're here to just learn like how it's situated and how some people take it and use it for positive means, and we're here to learn about it. We're not here to have some boring just sneer and say
And that's what I'm trying to say even with the very first live stream, is that Kwaku presents his items and stuff, but whenever there's somebody watching, a supervisor, he doesn't lash out. He doesn't get angry or like attack back. That's what he did on Twitter, and that's what they're going after me and stuff, and stuff. And that's what I'm saying, is whenever there's somebody watching, and when you saw he was acting very different. That's I was acting a personality, a personage. That's clearly not him in real life. Also,
well, we talk about KFAve a lot, and we've talked about Kwaku doing KFAve, and we wanted to mention to him or bring up to him this meta irony thing, and we were able to bring it up. Except we thought he was going to come in character, if that makes sense. Like we were a little surprised that he came in acting pretty sincere.
Because there's a character on Twitter, and then there's a character on the live stream, which I tell you when I was thinking, when I think it's just for fun, possibly ideas, concept for fun on their channel videos. Well, on Twitter, he gets really offended when he posts his esoteric schizo threads, and he attacks everyone. That's something that he does when he posts his things, like the homeless thread or this. And then when he came in to explain, as I told you, he was speaking with an eloquence. He brought up his books. I was like, hey, here's this.
We didn't even get into the homeless stuff because he might have. I mean, I'm sure he would have been polite with us. I did see him get mad about that one. That is one that I did witness on Twitter, because a lot of the stuff I didn't witness.
Yes,
but
that's exactly.
We let him talk about George Washington and all that stuff, and like none of us freaked out about that. But we know that his takes on George Washington get pretty salty. But we just listened and ask questions back to it and that sort of deal.
The same dialogue you had with him, even the same pushback on some of the things of George Washington, that's the exact same thing that goes on Twitter. But
except then it comes back, hey, you're a racist.
Yes. and there's some points, there's things where he doesn't keep what he keeps out context and items is he was going after Wilford Woodruff, the prophets, when they were saying, "Oh, this is a man of God." But he said, "No, this is not a man of God. That prophet was wrong, and this country is founded on Satanism and demonic items. The founding of this country." And the people are saying, "Oh, no, this country cannot be founded on something destructive, because that's not how the Lord works, or how it's only the devil only destroys, doesn't build up." And the statement of the prophets, even with Woodruff and George Washington's and the baptisms and the temple works, because these are holy men that work with visions and everything, and they put the statements of the prophets and everything, that these are the men of God, they were selected for this. So that's the backlash. But it's, as I told, it's always going back to the prophets. Even with the his listing statements, he didn't mention there was not just a random list. It was actually a reply to his commentary on the vaccine. The same things that he says on the lives and the videos also with Midnight Mormons. But because there's no one actually listening and watching him, he attacks, lashes out, and when he goes to his supervisors or his friends, he tells them something different. So, hey, they came and attacked me, or they are evil. So then Brad Whitbeck comes on to Twitter and saying, "Okay, what happened this time? Why is anonymous accounts attacking him?" That's the exact wordage used by him, Brad Whitbeck. And everyone's replying, "Oh, why is he calling people Nazis?" Which he actually did a couple of others. Why is he calling people hateful? Or he's attacking others because they don't think his homeless position is with a line with the church or everything. So it's just, as I told you in the first lesson, just cringe. It's all just cringe. It's not actual like he's but he's inconsistent, and because there's some type of frustration, it has to make it that everyone is attacking him. And then when he goes and explains to others, as he also brings up what's it called, Luke Benji, he's saying, "Oh, he made a poll, and every single this is not Instagram where only your followers can vote. A public poll on Twitter, everyone can vote." Luke Benji is actually a convert. Well, he's not anymore, but from Catholic lineage. He was an atheist at a point. He's just a little kid, and he actually friends with all DeathNet users, even me. But I don't know why. At one point, when the prophet had put his talk on saying, "No, let's not have what's it called,
Contention?
labels."
Oh, labels.
No, labels, yeah. And that's when most people were saying, "Oh, let's drop that. There's no label. Let's drop that's the labels." This was just the child of God, child of the covenant, disciple of Jesus Christ talk was in it, and that's when Luke Benji was saying, "Oh, there's nothing good out of this. There's not, it's all evils. There's nothing good out of them." While being our following us, being our friends. So I don't understand why. And that's why I spoke to him in DM saying, "Why are you saying we are doing this when you're literally following us, chatting with us? We are your friends. We are following you. Why are you saying this other stuff separately?"
Well,
And then
one
he's
of our
left the church.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, he's left the church now because he's a Trinitarian. Keiko says, "Oh, this was the cause of why he left the church." No, he actually doesn't believe in our church's position in the Trinity. He's left the church. He hasn't told anyone in real life, just on Twitter. He was going to go to a mission, but he says, "No, I got the Lord delayed the mission so that I can see the truth. Your Mormons are not Christians or anything." So it was not because of this net. It was
He
that's what
said
the
that?
context being left. Yes, and he's now in the Twitter with it's more cringe where the screenshots are being put. But yeah, it's not because of this net that poll. It's voted by random people, like as always. But he's always had the Catholic followers and Orthodox followers. He didn't live because of this net at all.
I think
he didn't go to his mission because he says, "Oh, I will be teaching heresy. I do not have a belief in the Trinity of the position of the church, and the church is just a false belief.
So,
there's no position." Yeah.
Kevan and I are both from Murray, Utah, and that just came up in the most recent Midnight Mormon stream where they brought up April Despain, who's been all over Twitter fighting because she put up the family proclamation in her yard, and then she got screamed at, and she had a PTA president send a bunch of trans flags or the LGBT pride flags over to her yard. Those two, the April, I grew up one street away from her with her older brothers, and Jennifer Sewell, the one who sent the flags, I grew up in her Sunday school class. And so we know all these different people. And then Kevin and I have seen that over at that school, there was some hidden video pushed out where the teachers were bragging about how they pushed critical race theory into all the different schools and type of stuff. And there's stuff going on around here. But then April herself, who doesn't even know what DesNat is, really quickly starts getting called the DesNat stuff by Jim Bennett. And we've been kind of on about this thing about the smearing tactic that's going on, that they're trying to create some sort of trans Floyd event or something like that, and then pin it on something that they've been trying to turn into the Taliban their whole lives. And Kwaku and Cardin don't do any favors. Like, my point is, if you're in the ex-Mormon world, they're painting the picture of themselves, because everybody in the ex-Mormon world will call Midnight Mormons DesNat. So you're painting your own picture for yourself. But I actually believe most ex-Mormons, like, you don't get to get away from it either. Like, whatever you paint the community you grew up in, that's how Maoists are going to paint you. You don't get to wash yourself of it. So stop it. You know? And
that's what I was going to say in this situation with Luke Benji and it being smeared as a DesNat thing, or just the hashtag, like she talked about, the talk with the labels and then everybody freaking out about it. My position through it all consistently was that, hey, guess what? I use it as a hashtag. It's a hashtag. It was never a label for me. It was never something that I put up next to my name to say, hey, I'm part of this club. I don't have a tattoo on my back that says, hey, this is my gang. This is my set I rep. It's a hashtag. Gosh dang it. I use a bunch of hashtags all the time. I use them for business and nobody labels me them. But it's only here in our little sphere where, like you said, they have to find something to mimic and mirror the smearing, the wrap-up smear campaigns going on for labels outside of the church. They've got to do it and cause that derision internally as well, is the way I see it. It's just like a two peas in a pod.
There's always going to be interests into any group or anything like that, or any movement or whatever. There's always going to be someone who comes in to ruin it for everybody. If you haven't noticed that I got pretty disillusioned with social media altogether. I'm not really super active on a whole ton of social media, a little bit, but I get irritated when I see, because I've kind of always been like that. I've always kind of the only label that I really put on myself is that I am a member of the church. Like, I don't really, I kind of see things in a certain way, but even politically, I've never aligned myself with any one group, you know what I mean? Or anything like that. And I think that it's pretty evident now, like, whenever you get on anywhere, that a hashtag can be used and it can be used by some nefarious actors. And I mean, who do you, like, on Twitter, you don't even know who a person really is, oftentimes, unless they're really putting themselves out there like you guys. But I mean, Twitter, obviously, it's the easiest place in the world to put together an anonymous account. So
I just go back to, the guy who was giving us grief. What's up, Forrest? He might be listening here.
Hey, Forrest.
Who knows if I go or not? But that's Jacob Hansen's
You're still out.
brother.
You still have it out for me.
That's Jacob Hansen's brother, Latter-day Skeptic. But we've kind of gone back and forth with him. He's cool too. At the same time, he'll back off and stuff. But he's kind of stuck in the new atheism mindset. And part of the stuff I keep pointing at is, he says I'm overly critical of Bill Real and those types of guys. All I'm saying is that those guys do a lot of stuff too. They think they're free of it. They're not free of it. But then they call whatever somebody else believes or holds on to evil and bad and beyond the pale, and something that must be gotten rid of, because although they're doing some sort of a belief system that's I just don't even view it as that different myself, which is fine. It's just when they turn around and say other people can't believe in their sorts of ways, or we got to do something about it because that's dangerous and cause harm, is the joke that we always say. Cause harm, cause harm, cause harm. It's harmful. And that they scientifically, a lot of stuff just came out this week that they're pushing the government, that they have to do background checks in England for anybody who's going to be a bishop or something like that. And they were bragging about that on Mormon Stories, to bring in the state to have oversight over this sorts of stuff. And everything's always just kind of this different layer of, who watches the Watchmen, to go back to Alan Moore, and the the state and all that sorts of stuff we don't view as some sort of thing that's better, or the statism that comes from it, especially. But I want to start getting back into beliefs. But we just wanted to mention that, and we were. I lost my train of thought there. But we'll just start getting back.
Well, hitting on the government's actually a pretty good segue into
right.
Ezra
That's what I was
Siegel.
thinking. I was thinking
Yeah.
all this idea, the Maoism, the communism, all the isms, right? And here I am with CosmicISM coming at you with another ism. Oh, goodness gracious. And I know it turns off a lot of people, even like they get mad when I say, hey guys, look at all this stuff we can learn. And they're like, no, we don't want any more. Like nobody's like, with Come Follow Me, think of the pushback you had even within the church of people who were excited to have a home-centered, like more on us, lazy learner type heart to heart with the prophet like we've had recently. And then you have a whole swath of members as well that are upset about this, that like, hey, they should tell us, like, if something's important, we should know. And that's the mindset. I don't have that mindset at all. I never did. So this is where like it's weird for me to see so many expectations from members of the saints about like, well, the prophet would know this and he would tell us, right? I never had that expectation growing up. In fact, I always read the scriptures and I was like, wow, we never talk about these things. Why not? And I found out on my own, it's not that they're not true. It's just that most people don't like to talk about stuff. Like half of the scriptures is catastrophe and destruction and wars, more than half, to be honest, if we're getting into the Old Testament, the Book of Mormon and what it might be. But we're never up there really digging into the details and the other layers that I think are available there. That's where the CosmicISM stuff comes in. But it also ties in directly to this government layer, to this layer of control and kingdomship. I'm in the middle of my next essay on my series right now, and I'm not sure if this will be number 11 or not, but I'm kind of at a stalemate with where I'm at with my essays. But this has been heavy on my mind recently, and it ties directly into this Ezra Siegel stuff, what's going on politically. And I would say all of this culture war stuff, which is what we've started, I think, the first 20 minutes here talking about, is just how this is upsetting the apple cart here, how the waves are pushing back and forth in our cultural society on the surface. But digging down deep, it's the same conversation I was having last week, and the same one that they're going to get upset about with me setting up a binary, setting up a kingdom of God versus a kingdom of the devil, like the Book of Mormon does. Why do you think we have that right at the beginning in Nephi's vision about him seeing what happens in our day at this great division, where you have a kingdom of God and a kingdom of devil? Unsaved, there are only two kingdoms, right? And only two churches that end up in the end, right before the very final scene. I believe that is metaphorically true. Sure. And I think at church in Sunday school, we get caught up only focusing on that like, yeah, there's evil out there and there's this opposition of good choices and bad choices, and it's necessary, and there's polarity and everything. And it must needs be that there's an opposition in all things. We understand that. Right. But at the same time, we can throw the baby out with the bathwater by making it all metaphysical, making it all metaphorical and allegorical, or all ethereal. Right. I don't. I believe that, like we talked about recently studying Isaiah, that prophecy has multiple layers of fulfillment. That when we're talking about things, the Lord isn't going to waste space when he talks about it to say, this is all etherical stuff. Now I'm going to teach you all the physical things, guys. And here's all the temporal stuff. It's very different, right? And they didn't seem to make sense, but now they do. I've never taken that approach. I've always approached this from the beginning to say they will appear in accord. They will be in harmony. If you're looking at both the ethereal, metaphorical, allegorical, fluffy side, the Sunday school side is what I'll call it, versus the juicy side. Hold on. This is when I normally wake up on Saturdays, guys. So before that derailed my thought, I was just saying that all of this wraps together nicely when you look at it as one thing in a binary. When you look at what we're doing as a church, and in this paradigm, in this CosmicISM manifesto, in Leiland's paradigm, his biased, mind control, dangerous paradigm, we are looking at the world through this binary, that there is a kingdom of Zion that we as members of the church have been enlisted and covenanted. We have literally covenanted all of our possessions in our lives to building this kingdom up. Now, when I say kingdom, it implies subjugation to a government. This doesn't mean that prophecy doesn't apply to government. This is, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Anthony Larson at all. If I bring that name up, okay.
Don't know the name.
Some people who will listen to this will know that name, but Anthony Larson is a member of the church who explored a lot of the same things I think I'll talk about right now in CosmicISM, in this catastrophism versus a long view of history like we have right now. I think everybody's asleep, and let me paint this picture for you the way I see it. And obviously people are going to, he's making up crazy ideas, and this is the dangerous part of it. Okay, so be on high alert, guys. This is the dangerous part. These alternative ideas we brought up before, and this will play into the government. Trust me, I'm pulling this back into the kingdom of Zion. Keep those ideas, the binary that I brought up. Zion versus Babylon is the way that I separate them in my mind, or good versus evil, or white versus dark, or whatever it might be. Those two things are the binary to hold over all of this. But when it comes to ideas and philosophies, we know and we talk about, and I just did a thread actually, which is convenient, on Doctrines of Salvation, a chapter on Elias, the spirit of Elias, and John the Revelator, and all these things that happen for the restoration that are considered an Elias or a forerunner, somebody to prepare the way and bring something in. Here goes schizo thought. Think of Daniel 7 and the prophecy of kingdoms, how you have the standing man of Daniel interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's vision of all the kingdoms of the world. We'll call that the kingdoms of Babylon, because it starts with Babylon, goes down to Medo-Persia, goes to Greece, goes to Rome, splits into the two legs, the eastern, the western. Then you have the 10 toes and the feet and the mercantile fourth kingdom that we're in today, where you have a mix of everybody, the Gentiles and all of it. And it's a mix of iron and clay, miry, loosely held together, going to scatter when what? When a stone cut from out hands, meaning a government created by God, comes and destroys this standing kingdom of Babylon. Okay, this was given to Nebuchadnezzar 600 BC, around that time. Remember, Daniel's the same contemporary as Lehi, Nephi, and all these guys, these same prophets. He's a political prisoner to this captured Babylon, and he's spilling the beans about what's going to happen to the rest of the world until the end, until the second coming, until our day, the last days. I bring this up because Ezra's eagle connects directly to the visions of Daniel and these political visions that he was having while a political prisoner in the kingdom of Babylon. Okay, so the cool thing about our church is that we don't throw the Old Testament out. Like, we don't throw any of the old prophecies out. In fact, I don't know any other Christian church that leans as hard into the prophetic, like the prophets, more than we do, because we see what the Book of Mormon is that it's an answer to all the open-ended questions that the Bible leaves up about the covenant that God makes with his chosen people, Israel, about the gathering, about the lost 10 tribes, about the covenants of land, and Abraham having his seed bless all the nations, and having them prepare the earth with the temple covenants and covenanting with the Lord before his second coming, the burning, right? Everybody knew about the flood leading up to this time. And this is where I'm speaking in a paradigm that would take the scriptures literally, right? Today, people don't believe in the flood, but they did leading up until the restoration. People believed that the flood happened, or that there were catastrophes, that there were major upheavals of the earth that happened in cycles. This was the normal take on things until the 1800s and the restoration of what I called last episode, and will continue to call, the dispensation of deceit, that rises in parallel to the restoration of truth brought about by Joseph Smith and the church. Okay, now a part of all of this, the government of America, I live in Arizona, the government of America was planted, or the soil was prepared by the Lord for these latter days, for this final kingdom to sprout up, to fulfill all of these covenants that the Old Testament guys like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and all of them, looking forward to the last days, saw that God would actually fulfill and make this happen through a kingdom in the last days. This is where it gets into Daniel's visions and then over into Ezra's prophecies, because Ezra in the Apocrypha mentions a latter-day kingdom, an eagle kingdom, that has a succession of leaders, rulers, kings, or presidents that are controlled by secret combinations, and that they serve for a series of time, taking over this government, and then they cause disruption and chaos at the very end as it all winds down and basically blows up. Like, their plans of bringing this society, this government, this latter-day kingdom into their own power and control, they end up fighting each other and dying and being burned at the end of the prophecy. And this is exactly what happened in the Book of Mormon. If we want to talk about what is the history of secret combinations in governments on this American continent, we have the record of the Jaredites and what happened to their civilization. It was the same thing. You had secret combinations that infiltrated and subjugated the government and manipulated the people to enslave them via the government by control and consent. It's going back to this agency question, right? How do you control other people, mind control them? Well, you influence them. And the best way to influence someone is by taking over their government. That's the 100%, because the government enforces law. Government has power to enforce or use force to change minds, right? Like, that's the whole battle here from the beginning. Now, rewind back to Adam. Adam formed a government. I believe he was the first king. He was the first king, and kingship, if a king is taken from the word kins. Adam's the first father to have kin, to have children, to have progeny. So in this idea, we believe the family proclamation brought up just recently here, that the family is that fundamental unit of society. That is the fundamental form of government, is the family. That a father as patriarch, as having dominion over his home and ruling, being able to enforce law and rule and judgment, so that the family can grow according to order. You can't, we talked about this last time again, you can't have order without rules. Rules are the same as laws. You can't have a society that functions without some type of government, a way for them to govern. Okay. Now, again, from our doctrinal lens, this makes sense, because when Abraham and all the prophets are taken up into vision and shown this macroscape, the prophecy, the plan of Jesus Christ, right? They're shown planets in order. They're shown the macrosphere of how God orders and controls all the planets. And then it talks about kolob and governance. So you have, again, even governance or government between planets and between the higher spheres, as they're mentioned or referred to in the scriptures, the planets and the cosmic things, right? And that God has direct control over that. Like, that's what our faith teaches, that others are just barely starting to ask these questions about, are we alone in the world, right? Well, for 200 years, the Mormons have been the space Christians who we have proudly proclaimed that we believe in, that there are multiple worlds, they're all inhabited, that God does this, that we can have the utmost confidence that the atonement is universal because he's a cosmic God. Like, this is the restoration of what I'm saying, the cosmic gospel that Hugh Nibley harps on, and that what I'm saying and writing and talking about and explaining this paradigm is what the temple is bringing back. The temple is a giant billboard to ancient secret societies, whatever you want to know. Anybody who is enlightened should see the temple as the restoration of this ancient government, ancient familial ties going back up into heaven and connecting the cosmos to man, because that's where it begins. We talk about government with Adam being the first one. Well, we know they were married in the temple in the Garden of Eden with Father. Like, that's a temple drama. That's a temple sealing. That's a temple ritual. That's a temple function. And that's exactly what the restoration and Joseph Smith brought back to the world. Nobody else has this. And they all are like, what are the Mormons with their temples, right? What are they doing in there? Crazy culty. But it's a restoration of the same pattern that we're looking to restore and have during the millennium. This is evidence to me that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is that stone cut without hands, coming to bust open and break down the kingdoms of Babylon, who do not have the same ancient system going into the millennium. They've got a money laundering system, a change the value of currency and fractional reserve lending system that goes back to Babylon. This is Babylon banking.
Raise the debt ceiling.
Yeah, this is the same issue that happened at the first advent of Christ, where you had the Jews and the leaders of the religious people, the covenant people, becoming whores with the government of the world, whoring with Babylon, becoming the whore of Babylon by participating in this corrupt, subversive government and form of subjugation. Right. So this is what the Jews were hoping Jesus was liberating them from, just like Moses had done before. Think about that. Going back into history, Moses had done the exact same thing for Israel, liberating them from a subjugation from Egypt, who had not only subverted them governmentally, but also ideologically. It was starting to do the same things that we're seeing today, that was happening to the Jews in AD. This is the repeating cycle. This is the pride cycle. But on the reverse end, you've always got a motive force pushing that pride. And that's opposition. That's the kingdom of the devil. That's the kingdom of Babylon. It's the same player that manifests over and over throughout the scriptures, and that I can with confidence point to and say it's happening right now all around us. Nobody's looking. Nobody's calling a spade when you're taking in context what we're looking at in the past and projecting it to now. That's prophecy. That God is the same before, today, and forever. And so we should be able to see through a prophetic lens and everything coherently show patterns or fractals or make sense. That's how I approach everything. And that's what my perspective, in my opinion, offers me, like, ad nauseum. Like, I can't even get to see all the different nooks and crannies in the mirrors that I'm seeing. Like, that's the amazingness of it. So I'm not doing any service in like I do in these podcasts or in these opportunities to explain myself. I just, like, it's too much. I'm like, and I give all the information.
I don't think it's too much. I think you hit on some ideas that, like I pointed out before, that I've even come to philosophically, but I always liked the Pride Cycle speech. It's my favorite speech or talk from the General Conference. And one of the things that I've read into about certain other religions, like other Christian religions, that start incorporating things like Kabbalah or Theosophy and those sorts of things, are because those religions mostly have a kind of Hegelian belief that there's only upward. And they start incorporating, or certain people who see that things are a little bit different start incorporating some of those other beliefs, because through Vilikovsky or whatever, there's somebody who is able to say, no, there's a destruction first, there's a cycle first. And so your religion that says there's only upward trajectory, just like Hegel says about the government or something like that, well, we need to incorporate these other people who are able to say, wait a minute, no, there's cycles, there's busts and booms.
Yes.
But Mormonism had that from the start. And well, you see it in the scriptures. I mean, I think somebody said there's like 7 different times in the Bible where stuff goes through this thing, and it's all over the Book of Mormon. I don't know what the Book of Mormon is, but the story of that.
Yes.
And Mormons have always had this in, or LDS have always had this in their belief system, and other places go incorporating the philosophies of men to try to put it in their more Hegelian Christian beliefs of the long arc of history only goes one direction. And they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem to coincide with reality very much there.
And for us, it's a horseshoe. It's a horseshoe that we fell literally from this perfect government state of understanding and unity. We call it Zion, being of one mind, one heart, being no poor among us, and being able to help. And everybody's, this is what the city of Enoch, they achieved and were taken up into heaven to live that higher law. They were removed from the earth, like literally. We believe that. And I believe that. And I know the people who don't even believe in Jesus or God or the Bible to begin with find that ridiculous, right? Oh, this guy's crazy and he's amazing. But this is no different than you going and talking about spirits and talking about ghosts or demons or in the psychedelic world and communicating with the, machine elves or whatever you want to talk about. Like
100 agree. And the problem is, like, I wouldn't take that away from you all, except you want to take it away from the LDS people.
Yeah.
So like that's really all there is to it.
And this, from this paradigm, to me, it's, again, more logical and makes sense that you have like after likeness, that Joseph Smith taught that the same sociality that exists here will exist there. And to me, that makes sense that we would come down here in a pattern after what we already know. It's not like, hey, I'm going to try and trick y'all now. Like if he's a God who loves us, he sends us down to say, hey, this should be familiar and feel familiar. And that's why I believe all of us have that inherent light of Christ and guilt, that we've been kind of through this before. We know what a social life doing this, making decisions and using our agency is like, because we did it before in the pre-existence. Again, that's a Latter-day Saint kind of exclusive doctrine, even among the Christian world, of a pre-existence. But all of these other dangerous ideas and philosophies like theosophy or whatever it might be, they're going to incorporate this idea, and they'll regurgitate it or spit it out as something wrong or a diffusion like reincarnation or whatever it might be, where they get the principles wrong, they mess it up, and then they present that as the truth when it's not. They've got the foundation that's messed up. So again, this goes back to the restoration being that restoration of that true foundation. The pride cycle repeating itself, but being restored, just like it had in previous dispensations by a prophet, by prophets always. God will do nothing but he reveal it to his prophets. Why doesn't anybody else believe that but the Latter-day Saints who are talking about prophets, right? Nobody else believes that. They believe that now the Christ spirit, that one consciousness, this effervescent Akashic record, is just the freedom to now walk the path. And it's not. That gets you to the path and should point you in your life to that path. But Jesus was very clear to say, hey, there's a way, and the way to enter it is through baptism, through covenants with me. Making promises with God gets you into the real door to enlightenment. There's no other way that you're going to see the same light in the same way, in the same power that will change your character in person from the outside. You're going to get peaks, but you're going to go back and tell people wrong. That's how I see everybody else approaching the esoteric stuff without having this proper foundation of the temple going forward. You've got to have a testimony that what Joseph Smith did and what the church has been doing since then witnesses to this, that this is the primary focus of God and Jesus Christ in these latter days, is getting the covenants of protection and sealing out to as many people on the earth as possible before it is destroyed. Okay, this does not get through even a lot of faithful Latter-day Saint heads, because they're in the all is well Zion sleep. They're in the no, we're not doing that anymore. America's the greatest. We're going to overcome it all. We'll eventually vote our way out of this. We'll eventually, figure it all out, and good will overcome. There are more good people than bad. They are ignoring in the face the Book of Mormon and the witness of all these societies that did the exact same thing. And I think that's why we were given these documents, is because we're heading for it. And those who are prepared, who have been doing the search and been doing the soul searching and changing of our hearts, just like over and over again in the Book of Mormon, is required of people to survive these pride cycles, is you've got to have a transformation of heart and desire and actually be obedient to what God says, right? These things are what I see the prophet today preparing the church in mass for. What have we done but for the last 40 years build temples at an unprecedented pace? And now they announced that they can build a temple like within 2 years with the new blocks program, where you can literally drop with helicopters these things and assemble a temple together in a matter of weeks.
I didn't hear that.
The
we have those capabilities
ex-Mormons,
now.
post-Mormons, and even other people, they're always so confused about the church's money and its saving and all that sorts of stuff. And we've always said, like, how do you not see that they're shorting the United States? It's betting against it's not saying that we want the United States to fail. It's that we just bet it's going to fail. And I frequently
Mhm.
mention, and I can't ever find it because I think they archived it or disappeared it. But Slate magazine, back when it was a magazine, we're talking like 10, 15 years ago when it went around everywhere. They had this long expose of like, what does post America look like? And Slate magazine had some like 10, 15 page paper on how what's going to survive is Mormonism. Slate magazine they were the ones who said that, just looking at the facts on the ground of this stuff. And these sorts of ideas, these guys get there through prophecy or through belief or some sorts of thing like that. But what I'm talking about is people who start looking at how there's only trade-offs, how it does seem that there's booms and busts, how religions outsurvive nations, and those sorts of deals. There's people like I've mentioned Spangler. We brought up the guy who was talking about oikophobia on Lotus Heaters this week. But there's it almost seems like, because it's always review in it's post hoc in the academic world. That's why you need prophecy, because there's some people who are like saying it before, but in the academic world they can only review it behind. But people reviewing it behind in the academic world are coming to the same conclusions. Is my point.
Well, even in the academic world, I believe you did have people that were looking forward and backward and doing this, and they got shunned. They got booted out of the club.
That's true too.
That's
Yes.
That's exactly what, and I've teased up to him a bunch, but that's exactly what Emmanuel Vilikovsky. I can't get it, so too shiny for this camera. that's what this guy did in the 1950s, in the middle of the 1900s. Okay, so I'm going to give like a 10-minute spiel on Vilikovsky to set this up, and then we'll go into Ezra's Eagle, because I think I want to tie them together with the cosmic aspects, because instead of just reading Ezra's Eagle prophecy, I want to read Ezra's Eagle and the one right after it, or at least go over them with you guys before our time's over. Because to me, it's a witness and testimony that I'm on the right track, that everybody else who wants to poo-poo me and say, hey, beware of what you're doing, whatever, they're not seeing things from the same vantage point. And so I have like no desire to care about what they say or care about their criticisms against me, calling me whatever they want. Or they always think I'm talking about them when I'm not. Like, I have my mind on things that are way more cooler. I'm sorry, but this is the way it goes. So Vilikovsky, we talked about the restoration of a dispensation of deceit and of truth, right? With Joseph Smith, and then you have the Maoist communist push. We'll just call it communism, right? That communism comes in to parallel the government of God restored through the United Order. We'll just say that way, right? Because everybody wants to throw that out there anyways and misrepresent what the United Order is and compare it to socialism, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they're very close on the spectrum, because how does Satan do anything but imitate what's great and remove the parts of control and import a way to manipulate agency, right? Like, that's exactly what it is. So there's going to be some similarities to what you see in United Order versus socialism or communism as it's presented to the world through this kingdom of Babylon, but they are not the same, not even close. In fact, there are so many resources out there that are responsible, and that any faithful Latter-day Saint who is really looking to see like the balanced side of that conversation, there are resources out there. So don't fall for that trap. It's easy points on the anti-Mormon bingo card to call out stuff like that, or they just throw them as passing asides. Even now, like, I've got family members who have left the church, and even though we've had this conversation where I'm like, no, they're not the same. You can't use that. They'll still use it. Like 3 years later, they'll come and have the same, just like the United Order. And it's like you're living in that same little bubble where you don't synthesize or integrate anything else, but I have to. Everything you bring to me, I don't know. So like that's where I see inconsistencies with some of the ex-Mormons in my life. But United Order is not socialism. But this idea is exactly the stone cut from out hands that's going to overthrow all the governments. Well, our church is quasi-political for that very reason, that we've got more of a culture, a political culture, right, to our church. And this would be what I imagine what Kwaku and everybody that wants to talk on Wilford Woodruff or the early 1900 prophets and the changes to the word of wisdom or whatever it might have been in the early 1900s, the acquiescence to the government and polygamy and things like that, where they feel the church went off the rails in the 1900s with all that stuff. There's a whole group of people out there that believe that. I'd reject that. I don't think so. Like, I think God knows what he's doing, and that's how I approach everything. But apart from all that, like, what had happened is you have at the same time that there's this ecclesiastical restoration going on through the church, and what our prophets are doing and what the Doctrine and Covenants is being compiled in the late 1800s, going into the 1900s. There's a revolution in science going on at the same time. Just like we talked about academics looking backwards and not being able to look forward. Well, there were some looking forward. Emmanuel Vilikovsky was one of these guys. He was a polymath. He studied multiple different disciplines. He's an interdisciplinarian like me. And I'm one like him. I'm not going to put myself up on his level. He's genius, absolutely. And he started as a psychoanalyst and was contemporaries with Freud and Carl Jung. Okay, so this is a guy who's in the who's of circles. Like, he was friends with Einstein. He had correspondence with Einstein until the day Einstein died. Einstein was reading Vilikovsky's books on his deathbed, and you can look that up. Like, so this is not me bringing out some weird somebody way out in left field and saying this fits the piece and I'm forcing it in. This guy was a part of the mainstream in the early 1900s and then was shunned. There's a whole thing called the Vilikovsky Affair, if you look it up, where he brought to bear evidence to the academic world, but he did it in a radical way that got him slapped on the wrist. What he did was because he studied, again, multiple disciplines, and in the early 1900s, 1950s, as academics was getting siloed into its structures, that was a big taboo, that he came out and publicly released his findings as a book to the general public, and he was cross-pollinating against various disciplines. So he was making commentary on geology. He was making commentary on paleontology. So like the study of the rocks and sediments on the bottom of the ocean and stuff like that. He was making commentary on planetary astrophysics. He was making commentary on psychology. So he was spanning all these different disciplines in how he was presenting his work. And he got yelled at for that. Like, he was called out of line for that. Also releasing it to the public and not to peers, like to have it peer reviewed. He got smashed in the face again, and everybody just discredited his work. But what he did was he went straight to the public because what he found was so radically different than what everybody was setting up on a pedestal that he knew he needed to put it out there in his own voice. Otherwise, it would never make it through peer review, ever, because of how radically, like, he was posing changes to things. Now, what was he proposing that was so different? What was he doing that was so dangerous? I'll start with the book he first released called Worlds in Collision. In his time as a psychoanalyst working with Freud was obsessed with Oedipus. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Oedipus complex and that kind of thing, and Freud and his ideas on that.
Yep.
Vilikovsky was deeply moved by this and wanted to research Oedipus and Akhenaten and a lot of these Egyptian things that had a relation to it. In fact, the connections to Moses and things like this. He's of Jewish background. So again, he's coming from it, knowing the Bible story and things like that, and also having studied some of the Midrashim and some of the Jewish texts. So he had a little more insight into the history of the Exodus, which, if you're in Jewish culture or any Semitic culture, like they take that very seriously. The Exodus is very important. And in fact, if we read the Book of Mormon as members of the Church Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we should see the same, that prophets like Nephi and Isaiah, and constantly they're pointing back to Moses's faith in the Exodus and the people in the Exodus as a precursor or as a preamble to what we will experience at the deliverance of the second coming to the Lord. So like, it's a direct comparison. And I call it all the time, there's this concept that in my mind, like, refreshes this idea. And it's called the Exodus is apocalypse, or the past is prelude. Prophets have said this. Neil A. Maxwell has a talk where he goes into this, but this is exactly what the Exodus is. It's like a mock practice for the second coming, when the Lord comes to deliver his people and fulfill the covenant in the end. Right. So like that's important to know when you're looking at the Exodus from a faithful perspective, in my opinion. So this is why Vilikovsky, he fixates on this Exodus point and says, if this was a real historical event, right? If the disasters that are described in the Exodus and in the text actually happened, like fire coming down from the sky, there are reports of earthquakes, of falling rocks that were like lava rocks that were falling. They thought maybe a volcano had erupted. They didn't know. Like, there's a lot of speculation. Mount Sinai being an active volcano or whatever it might be. Like, there was just a lot of extra notes in the lore of what happened during the Exodus that makes it seem like something catastrophic was happening. And if that happened 1500 BC, right, there would be records in the neighboring territories that are non-biblical, right, that should attest to having some type of catastrophe of that nature happen. So that was his quest as he went out searching this Oedipus, Akhenaten stuff, and then incorporating into the Bible and the story of the Exodus. Well, he came back, and that's what this Worlds in Collision is his findings, and he's sourced, right? Like, he is well sourced. And before I move on to say what his findings were, even Hugh Nibley said that Vilikovsky was right, but he probably could have used better sources. So this is where Vilikovsky's picking some sources, but there were a lot more he could have pulled on or could have focused on more to make a stronger case to, like, hey, here's what I'm presenting. But he didn't. And because he didn't, a lot of his sources were picked apart. And because of that, like, you know how it is in academia, if you have one bad source and they don't like your idea, they'll use that one bad source to get rid of your whole idea. So like, this is why he published it himself, knowing that he was going to go to bat, knowing that he was going to have a fight on his hands with the establishment, because his ideas were this. that the Exodus did happen. And in fact, all of the records of the records of the people around there said that it was a planetary catastrophe, that a comet or a planet, and that's those exact words that he uses. He says a comet or a planet had passed over and caused these destructions. And by the records of the people, not just in Egypt and the Middle Earth at that time, the middle of the world at that time, but also in the Americas and in South America. And there are all kinds of records around these same times that the planet Venus was making a pass by and causing destructions and catastrophe on the Earth. And this is where a lot of the Venus worship and a lot of these things come into in some of these intermittent cultures that we find during these time frames. So he brings all this evidence to bear that the agent or the cause of the destructions of the Exodus was the planet or comet, or a planet acting like a comet or looking like a comet, and it was Venus, as described by the people. This is not his like ideas. I think it was they in the things that they're writing, they're calling it Venus. That this is the planet Venus. It moved from its places and blah blah blah. Like they're freaked out, and this is why all of the astrologers were so careful to watch the position of the planets. Is because in previous times in epics they moved. They weren't static and fixed in their positions like we see them and expect them to be now. But that they did move, and they watched and witnessed them move. And that's what all these writings that Vilikovsky started to pull up were witnessing to. So this ancient witness of what the fathers had said, right, is that the planets did not always stay on their same course, that the planets were once much closer to the Earth and that they interacted with the Earth. And this is why there was planetary worship. This is why you had all this idolatry going on in the Old Testament about Ashtaroth. And that's Venus. That's the star Venus. Ashtaroth is Venus. If you look it up, like when you're talking about all the cults and what Israel was giving into with the Phoenicians and the Assyrians and all of their temptations in sex cults. And again, the dangerous ideas are the inversion of these correct principles and worshiping something else. And that's exactly what we're talking about. These atheist bros or whatever, they go to do, because when you take out the religious in you, you fill it with something else, because that's inherent. That's absolute truth, is that our desire to be tied back to God and to the ultimate reality is real. You can't shake that. And so they're going to fill that gap with something else. Any comments before I move on a little bit on Vilikovsky's ideas?
So you said Vilikovsky's part of what he was pointing to was that the whole entire Moses story and Exodus was something that definitely happened, like historically. And you said some sort of references. I saw a lot of different people talking this week. This is the pushback I'm supposed to give. And I don't know the actual history and story about this stuff, but there's a lot of people nowadays saying that Moses never even existed. Have you looked into any of that? Or?
Yeah. I'm familiar with that. And I've had people come to me because I talk about Moses a lot and the Exodus a lot. So I have a lot of crazy ideas come back to me about like, well, Moses is actually Satan, or Moses is actually Lucifer, or Yahweh is actually
we talked about that last time. Yeah. But then there's like Dan McClellan, the person who we're pretty critical of, but he'll say that, all that story was written later and that sort of stuff. But you're saying Vilikovsky went and did some actual research into that, or
and it lends credence to that Moses was real and that these things happened and that this stuff was real. And so this is why, again, he gets pushed out baby with the bathwater and all of these ideas with him, because he gets, again, targeted by the academic for whatever it is. Like they pick on something and then they throw everything out with him. The thing with Vilikovsky is that he released so many books and made so many predictions. So we're talking about who's going to predict the future and check future stuff. He said, hey, I know you're not going to believe me, so I'm going to kill you guys with sources. I'm just going to say, look at all this stuff. You're going to have to deny all this to dismiss this, because it's not just one witness. It's not just an Egyptian account that says Moses is real, but it's all a bunch of different pieces that he brings into this puzzle. With that, he says, we can't deny that. I lost my train of thought for a second. I'm trying to figure out where to go with this, because you asked about the validity of Moses and how he presents that. He says, this story of
was he actually addressing that, or did he just start from the assumption already that, or was he looking to address that?
That's what started what he's writing about here. But this isn't all about Moses. Like the book isn't all about, hey, I'm going to go only on the Exodus. He mentions tangentially how the things he's finding would fit what was being described in the Exodus. For example, like around the time of the earthquake, or around the time of the Exodus and the 10 plagues and stuff, earthquakes were witnessed in the surrounding areas, especially on that 10th day, the day when the firstborn of all was taken. That there was a massive earthquake in the middle of the night, is what they said, around midnight, that an earthquake happened that shook everybody and made huge destructions. And he, again, posits that this allowed for them to escape or to move or to do some of the things they did during these times. Not just that, but also witnesses of other events, like they call it flowing milk and honey. in the Old Testament Exodus account, where they were being taken to valleys of flowing milk and honey. This same idea of milk and honey flowing was mentioned in surrounding areas, again through historical records, as being a something that came from heaven and fell down. And now he describes it in modern scientific terms as like naphtha or hydrocarbons, that there were hydrocarbons in the atmosphere from whatever passing body had made by. So let me paint this picture. If we're talking about the Exodus as a Passover, and this Passover is of a planetary body, a comet. For one, that's the same language that Joseph Smith is using when he's saying the last grand sign before the second coming, the world will say it is a comet or a planet. Okay, so Joseph Smith is already using the same language that Vilikovsky in 1950 is coming forward and presenting to the scientific community as saying, hey, this thing in the past, the Exodus, it looks like the Passover was due to a planetary comet or a comet or a planet that was acting like a comet. When you have a comet tail pass by the Earth, and this is why there's an innate fear in a lot of older societies and cultures and oral traditions with comets, that when they appear in the sky, it's a bad omen, or that there's destruction that comes with comets and things like that, is because if Earth passes through the tail of a comet, all of that material gets deposited into the atmosphere and it causes interactions. This is what Vilikovsky goes into detail about in these books, is that a planet passing over and dropping down what it contains in its cloud, right? Because it's going to have a cloud of plasma around it as it moves, and also a plasma tail, like a contrail, like you would see in a normal comet, right? And this is why when they couldn't see this, this is why the Exodus is described as a pillar of fire and of cloud. They couldn't see what it was until it would come down and reveal itself, like that there was some type of cloud or whatever that was occulting whatever was up in the sky, until it would come down and reveal it, and then it was bright and it was scary. And this is again, I'm not doing a great job of smoothly describing this, but I'm leaving enough dots that people should be able to connect the dots. Like, for example, our temples, the steeples on them represent this very tabernacle in the wilderness, this Exodus event, where you have the host of the Lord, as it's described in the Old Testament, coming down, and literally the presence of the Lord, which is described as light that can kill people, like the servant who reached forth to touch the Ark of the Covenant was electrocuted and zapped instantly, fried, boom. Like this, there was real power that was coming down to the tabernacle from whatever was above, leading the Exodus. This is like a reality of what we read in the scriptures, that the presence of the Lord would come down, and only the high priest, only the person authorized with the proper equipment, with a purified heart, was able to go into the Holy of Holies when that presence was there. When that physical manifestation was happening in the tabernacle, that's when God could appear. And that's when the Lord would come down and speak to the high priest and judge Israel and give instructions and speak to him and stuff like that. Like, it was in this Holy of Holies that this communication would happen. It was like a real life Zoom call like this, okay? Being powered by the presence of the Lord that was happening between whatever was in the sky above the Israelites and the earth. To us, that sounds crazy if you don't have some type of physical mechanism to explain how that could happen. And the modern scientific world poo-poos it and says that couldn't happen because nothing we see today is reflecting that. Well, this is what Vilikovsky is fighting. And this is what the Communism Manifesto, and I believe all scriptures, are witnessing against, is that we should take the witness of the fathers, these people in the scriptures, what they said they saw, and these people in mythologies and cultures all around the world, and oral traditions of the Native Americans and every culture and every land, and we should take them seriously and say, perhaps they saw what they said they saw, and we're not the ones to say that they didn't. And they all said that they saw these planets that came by and would strike the earth with lightning bolts. That's why all of the planets in mythology and stuff did battle in the heavens with lightning bolts. That's why all of them in their depictions as well, in their idols and their iconography, like Jupiter is always depicted with a lightning bolt in his hand, or all of these planets, right? This gets into what Vilikovsky posits, that he says, for this to happen, for planets to come into close contact and not to just completely obliterate themselves per the laws of gravity, right? That there would have to be some type of repulsive force at the same time, like an electromagnetism, right? Like magnets coming together. And so they're not going to smash into each other, but they will repel each other or play off each other like two magnets would. Okay. This goes into some anecdotes that Joseph Smith talked about with the return of the 10 tribes. And he says in certain things, I don't have it pulled up to give you the sauce now, but if you can look at this, look at Joseph Smith talking about two colliding planets. He said, what would melt the mountains? What would melt the mountains to lower them like valleys and raise the valleys up, like the scriptures say will happen at the second coming, but the coming together of two planets. And he says, now the scientists of the world will say that no such thing could happen, that the two would obliterate each other. But he says, no, if one's coming with a little speed more than the other, it will overtake the other and take it with it. So he's saying like that a planet could come and connect like magnets, like boom, and take us away. And that's exactly what Vilikovsky, outside of the church, outside of everything, using outside Gentile resources, right? I'm just saying outside of scripture and prophecy, he's using those same sources to basically say the same thing, that what happened in the Exodus, based on all the evidence that he connected, was that a planetary body passed by the earth and electrically communicated with the earth. Those electrical communications caused the destructions. When you get into this, this is where I introduce electric universe, electric everything, because this is the foundation that Vilikovsky was saying. We need to address this because our ideas of how space works is not right, and it will eventually blow up in our face if we don't fix it now. And they laughed at him, and they didn't listen, and they went on, and that's where we're at today, is they still haven't fixed the foundation of science to include electromagnetism in astrophysics. Now, they're being forced to now.
Did he pull from the Popol Vuh? We brought that up last time. I mean, I know.
Yeah.
So we brought a lot of different stuff, like talking about the Earth being a presence or having an existence, and that's so crazy. But yeah, that the Pachamama and the Popol Vuh. I mean, this is other traditions going back forever. Talk about
and
the
it's
Earth.
in more records and more ancient records engraved on walls, the petroglyphs, more very anciently. And that's what I'm trying to bring up with the thread of Kwaku did, because he brings in that portion, the segments that I showed the Leiland. He mentions that there's the same narrative told. There are the same traditions in Masonry of Venus, and he made Kwaku said he does mention the details, the specifications, but it's just the remembrance memory of what was seen that is kept in tradition and passed down of what happened, of the narration and story that what actually happened. Venus has always had 5 stars, 5 segments. That's what something that was in Kwaku's thread. I'm not sure if you can put it up. Guess what happened also with Dan McClellan is the same mention is the thing. Oh, it's just Jesus and Christ just came. God just came because of a same story that happened before. When that same story is the same story that is told through the memory of the planets, which is also in Kwaku's thread of the woman or the father birthing a child. It's the same story of Jesus, Mary in birth. It's just the narration of the planets that's told globally, which is also in all of the Native American traditions verbally. It's not just the Popol Vuh, it's the traditions of every nation and people. The same Venus and descriptions, their drawings, their star. It's always the 5-pointed star of not just its path right now, but its tail, the beardedness of the comet of it, the electric snake, the feather serpent. It's the narration, the story is all. Yes, and that's just one. That's when I say just one out of many. It has many names for the Popol Vuh and the similar traditions of Mayan heritage of the Pocomchi is Kukumats, Cook. Umatsu Cook, it's a quetzal, a bird. There's a feather, resplendent feather.
Like a rainbow.
Yes. And the serpent, feather serpent, resplendent serpent. And that's been happening since the Olmecs, even into the Japanese. In Japan, also over there in their mythology, the story, it's the same story, the thunderings and lightnings, the sun against the snake, the primordial chaos of the sea. It's the same story, even the Popol Vuh, the chaos, the waters were calm. Everyone, then after the calm, began the creation, the organization, and then there's the great floods and mythologies, there's the separating of the sea, crossing of the water, and also the sun. It's all just in mythology form of the same memory of what happened above in the skies. And that's something. Do you have that thread? I think it's in the Google Drive link. It's just to show you guys just how it is the memory passed down in tradition, but it's seen
that's
as,
like this is like all stuff like Graham Hancock, pushes in his latest on Netflix.
He was canceled from Netflix because he's dangerous.
Yeah, he's dangerous. He's a dangerous.
I would say, like, my take, for example, coming from someone who actually studies Vilikovsky and not somebody who stumbled into this through Netflix, right? Because there are a lot of people that are finding this stuff through Netflix, through a Randall Carlson, through a Graham Hancock, through these types of Joe Rogan type podcasts. Right. I think that's awesome, but they're a stepping stone. They're the commercial Babylonization or whatever of this idea. So I would say take them with a grain of caution, because they're pushing like alien agenda, who knows what, NWO stuff.
Yeah.
They're off a foundation.
But it's interesting, I guess. But it is interesting I just think that to see the different ancient civilizations from around the world that had.
He's putting on video at least.
Well, and he, I mean, here he is. He's talking about ancient stuff that happened too. Ancient apocalypses and all this stuff. And yeah. So I just think this is it's an interesting, just the parallels.
Let's see if we can try with the screen share now.
Oh, you go ahead.
Where is it?
I was
there
gonna
it
do
is.
one, but no, that one's mine. If she wants to share one, let her share. I'll share something after this.
I'm not seeing something to share.
Let's see. Percent, I think this is gonna mess up my camera and stuff. Well, I don't have camera, so let's see if it works. Screen.
But this is a huge part of it. Comparative mythology. This is like, when I studied this in school, they said, yeah, that's these myths are all out there, but that's just their way of fantasizing or trying to make sense of the world that they found themselves in. And then they never go in to try and connect any of the dots. But when you go and dive in and you see that they're all basically saying the same things, it becomes way more intriguing. The part to me that has catalyzed all of this, though, is to see how it connects to our temple ritual, to see how it connects to the restoration, to see how it fits into this bigger prophetic picture.
Yeah, the Mayans also get heavily credited for how scientific they were about their
astronomy and
their
knowledge
astronomy
of the sky.
Yeah, there's
We
a
don't see
recording
anything.
error.
It's just a black screen.
It's got the thread in there. It's just really small.
Oh, I can't see.
Oh, you can. I think you can see, but I can see it. It's a black screen.
It's just a black screen?
Yeah.
Because I see the thread going down the middle, but it's just, you just have to zoom in on it really far.
Well, I'll pass it on because Leiland has the link itself.
Oh, now it's just black screen to me this time.
Yeah.
Where's the link at? Is it in our chat that we had?
Yes.
You can also.
It's 1 and 2. Because my screen sharing and my audio, it's all in a weird connection right now. See if I can pass on to you a new link.
Can you send it again? Because I'm not sure which thread you're trying to share.
So I got to see some of this stuff. I got to go to, on my mission, I got to go to the pyramids of Teotihuacan a few different times and see the temple of Quetzalcoatl and the 3 different temples. The one's the sun, the moon, the stars type stuff. The idea of 3 and all that sorts of idea and things that are, it was actually generally kind of a useful missionary tool when we were missionaries, is start talking to people about the Aztecan beliefs and that sort of stuff and the different ideas behind it. And
that's the thing about some members of the faith, is that there's these stories, but the whole world, there's a flood myth, but they're so focused and searching on, well, it has to have the same vocabulary for the rest, but they don't see that the rest of the mythologies, they still have the same story, but they just so focused on the Book of Mormon. Oh, you have to have this real specific things of the Book of Mormon that you have to find, where there's this other thing already present that is already part of this gospel that we know. It's just a thing that's overlooked at. If it's not really specifically just in detail, because that narrations, the elder traditions, they present through the teaching of narration mythology, of memories, the teachings, everything in a different storytelling mode. That's something that I told my grandmother. It's by teaching things, you have to teach it in a story narration to keep it in their memories of people, because not everyone can write it down.
Well, think about what we do in the temple. It's a ritual drama. It's exactly that. It's a retelling in story form, these eternal truths that are the macro plan in simple form. Nibley calls it a hologram, and I agree. A hologram would be like a projection of the ultimate, right? It's what we're doing right now with this digital interfacing. It's a digital interface with eternal reality. That's what the temple is, and that's what I believe all of these memories are reaching out to. It's a tie back to this ultimate reality and wanting to make sense of the destructions, the world-ending apocalypse, all of these things that were witnessed and seen and experienced by people. They are trying to make sense of them, kind of like my instructors in college said. But there's more reality to them than modern society lends credence because of this restoration of deceit and this detachment from the mythology and the culture of the past that has been taking place since 600 BC, like we brought up in the last episode with the, Thales of Miletus in Greek, removing mythology from his philosophy and being lauded for that. That they can now, without that foundation to be tied back to all those literal catastrophes and things, now we can really understand the world in the way that we can move it and maneuver the pendulum. That's kind of how I see it. But the comparative mythology part is so compelling.
These past planetary things, they play into being important because the prediction is they'll happen again. Is that
yes? Yeah.
Okay.
That this is this. I mean, any language you read about the second coming, have you read Doctrine and Covenants lately? Like, if not, like, it's all this language. It's catastrophe. Even in Doctrine and Covenants section 1, I encourage anybody listening to this, go through and just scan that after this conversation and listen to the language of catastrophe. The coming down from heaven with power, shaking the heavens, the stars falling to the earth wobbling to and fro. All of these are archetypal, meaning this is the same type of language that is used in ancient descriptions of the same thing, of the planets going into chaos and fighting and having a war in heaven type thing. That this is what everybody's pointing to in not just, let's say, biblical prophecy of a second coming advent and what Adventism is waiting for, this advent of Christ and a giant catastrophe, right? We're an Adventist religion, actually. That's why we are the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We know that these are the latter days or last days before this big conflagration, meaning a big burning of fire. And going back to these ancient cultures, they all knew that there were these cycles of renewing of the earth, and they would go through water and through fire and through water and through fire. And you would have these different interactions with planetary bodies depending on the cycles on a bigger scale kind of thing.
So if it were to happen again, would it necessarily need to be Venus and Mars, or it could just be like a meteor or a meteor shower type deal, or
the
or it
truth
necessarily should be the those planets?
Leland talking to you right now, as my opinion, it could be, I'm open to anything, like anything that could happen. It could be comets that come in and pull the Earth from its orbit and take us to a whole nother setup or configuration. I don't know.
Yeah,
it could be a new planet coming out of the sun or something, you know?
What's the comet, the blue comet that they talk about?
Pan stars, maybe. I'm not sure. There's one that's
Nibiru?
passing by during the same eclipse in a year or so as well that everybody has an eye on, that I kind of keep track of stuff like this. Just because to
Nibiru
me,
or something like that.
and that plays into this too. Like, see, all of these weird, seemingly schizophrenic conspiracy theories or whatever, they're all nice and neatly brought together when you switch the foundation through which you're looking at them all. Because this idea of Nibiru, or Planet X, is what a lot of people will call it, right? Is this idea that there's this recurring planet that we just can't see because of its orbits or because of its composition or the atmosphere around it. And
like a brown dwarf or something like that.
Yeah, which would be a sun, essentially a star that had been depowered, had powered down, lost power somehow, right? In an electric universe, this makes total sense because planets can receive power or be removed from power, like interchangeably, like a plug, like plugging things in, right? Like that's how planets work in an electric universe. It's not that they have to burn X amount of gas or hydrogen before they explode and transform and this and that. No, the outside influence is what is transmuting or transfiguring these planets and stars. Just like we see and believe as Latter-day Saints with, humans and bodies on the earth, that it's light from above that can transfer, an outside power that comes in. That's what the electric universe perspective is on astrophysics and planets, that they're powered electrically from an outside source, and we have no idea where that's coming from. That's a big problem to mainstream science. For like, if I want to say the electric universe is more valid than mainstream science, they're going to point to ideas like this. And, well, you don't even understand where the source of your energy is coming from, or blah, blah. Well, you don't either. You make up a big bang and you say that it was all this thing. Like, you have your own philosophies on a different foundation that you're looking to do this all. This idea of electric universe is coherently like pulling together the witness of everybody in the past. So the cultural witness of the fathers, what they said. And again, to me, this is the spirit of Elijah, not just, again, doing the ordinances for these dead people, but actually believing and taking seriously their experience and incorporating it into our understanding of Jesus Christ. Like, that's also, to me, the spirit of Elijah. And so why are we dismissing all of these ancient witnesses about planets, about these things, about these esoteric topics, to a completely modern, separated view of them, or trying to mate those two? It doesn't make sense. And that's not what I believe Joseph Smith was doing.
Let me ask a question on the danger of this. Is there any sort of way that humans can bring this about faster or make this happen, or is it going on God's timeline or whenever the end happens? Is this something that somebody can go like push some nuke button and make this whole thing happen? Or, I mean, I think I obviously kind of know that the answers, but maybe they can or can't. But if this is a true or not true thing, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But it's not something that somebody can make happen because they're a nut. You know, you can't go take over the planet and then make this happen.
Well, this is where my ideas, we're getting deeper into the weeds. I wouldn't normally present ideas like this to somebody who I'm just introducing these things to, but I would say absolutely there is some personal responsibility in terms of the governance of the planets on spheres under God. We'll put it, or in roles under God. We'll talk about the angels or archangels or watchers or whatever you might have, translated beings who have responsibilities unto many planets. Like these people in the economy and government of God, I believe, have roles and things to play. But I think that they still have agency to a certain respect. This is where we can take the book of Enoch and place it into this timeline in terms of what was happening with the watchers before the flood, which was a catastrophe, where you had high technology on the earth. You had a high civilization that had come from Adam and deteriorated and diffused down through apostasy again. But then there was some type of planetary disruption. A lot of the sources around the dissolution of Atlantis or this previous antediluvian type of civilization point directly to angels, we'll just say like translated beings, giving secrets away that they shouldn't to cause major mass destruction and subversion of mind control, right? Like these same things that we're worried about today with an AI takeover and this and that, or nuclear bombs destroying the world at a touch of a button. These archetypally, that's the same concern that was before the flood, that you had these technologies that were given to men on earth from higher beings, whether it's your DMT machine elves that, you know, Apple's mapping in that realm or whatever you want to say, where you're getting these ideas from, whatever watcher is revealing certain technologies that we're having today. I believe there's also an element of unauthorization to it, that there are evil things going on, manipulations that could go on, and that ultimately this is why the time here in these last days is cut short by the Lord, is that there are some shenanigans going on in terms of what the Antichrist and Babylon will be able to do with the planets to convince people. So humor me for a second. If the planets follow this line of logic, because I know this is, I think your listeners will appreciate this. If what I'm presenting is true, then we have to revisit how astrophysics works. I understand that. And I know that's a huge daunting task. And wow, Leiland, you're crazy. You know, only a psycho would do this. Okay, great. Call me whatever you want, but get over it. And let's do this exercise. If Vilikovsky's right, and these planets were moving in recent history, how does that make sense in how we understand the world? It doesn't. You have to fundamentally address what's going on in astrophysics. Because as of right now, Einstein and Newtonian physics, electricity doesn't move planets in that paradigm. But in the paradigm Vilikovsky's presenting, and that I'm presenting, and that I believe the scriptures present, with God saying that the light of Christ, or light, energy, truth, is what moves and powers all the planets, we should take that at face value and say light is the dominating motive force of all things in the cosmos. Even us, we're electric beings powered by energy, and we have to moderate that, right? We have to receive it. We have to consume it and pull it in to transmute it out. I believe the planets are the same exact thing, okay? So we're receiving outside energy source via electromagnetism. And that's just a big catch-all because we still don't even understand electromagnetism. Same thing with gravity. We don't understand gravity, yet we're going to pretend that all these things happen. Yeah, sorry, I had the thread up. I'm not sure if we wanted to go into that before I go into the electric universe stuff. I just don't know what we're talking about on this.
For sure. That leads, I don't know if that's jumping, but this is all part of the Ezra Eagle prophecy, like all leads to it, or
help us out.
Separate stuff.
I didn't really read through all these, to be honest, because when you start having ideas like this that are detached from a syncretism idea that is tying them all together, and like what he's doing to me, like if I read through this and he's presenting a totally different paradigm than what I found whittling out my way, like connecting tethers to a center plumb line, I just turned off immediately. I'm like, okay, we're gonna have to go through every slide and talk about what his assumptions are, what his understanding of Babel, of Nimrod, of how he's defining things, and he's not here to do that. I'm not sure if he'd be willing to do that. I'd love to. Like, I'm not trying to be adversarial to him. And in fact, like when I made a tweet recently last week, Guatemax told me he took it personally when it wasn't even about him. It was about the people commenting on our YouTube video that that were making assumptions about what I'm saying or what I believe without ever asking me or even reading my documents. Like, it was clear a lot of the people making comments on my last video didn't take the time to go see the sourcing for what I'm doing or the framing for what I'm doing. Like, so all these ideas about planets being alive, if you went to my article, I've got like 3 pages of sources from our guide to the scriptures where it says the earth is a living entity. And I have it right there, like all the things for what we're talking about, for why I believe them. Now you can argue about if that's true or not. That's fine. But don't twist what I'm doing. I'm presenting this in a faithful paradigm to say, hey, we can believe these things and synthesize everything else from the world faithfully to it. There's no need to get rid of the foundation here that Joseph Smith has restored with the temple, or that we have proclaimed about America and the Constitution being divinely inspired by God. That's why the premise for this entire conversation with Kwaku here about George Washington being evil and things is I immediately can throw it out. It means nothing to me. And that's where I'm like hesitant to even go through this, because I don't want to be mean to him. I'm not trying to be adversarial is kind of the point that I just wanted to beat this dead horse a little bit more.
We can move it. I don't know if it's getting towards Ezra's eagle. I'll let you finish, Guatemax, but that's a little small on the screen. I can see that's an image of Venus, right? That woman, and there's the depiction of Venus, but Tower of Babel's there. And who's the guy?
For just the Venus segment, because I'm trying to see if it's number 1 or in number 2 segment, because that's the only part that I showed you.
The Queen of Heaven here, this one?
Yeah, that's the mythology portion of the memory, because he also mentions Venus's 5-star raid crown. I'm trying to mention. And that's the birth of the woman with the child.
Yeah. And this is what everybody talks about happened in 2017 recently as well, with actual constellations in the sky. And I believe that too. Like, I don't discredit that. I think the stars appear in the sky as they are today for signs and seasons. That's not a mistake, because I talk about planets once being closer to the Earth. It doesn't negate what's happening right now either. Like, this is the beauty of what I'm presenting. I'm not taking away from what you already believe. If you believe this stuff with that constellations or blood moons have anything to do with the red moon in scriptures, good for you. I don't. But I'm not going to take that away from you, because maybe it helps you prepare for the second coming or get your faith in line. That's great. I'm not going to take that away. But I'm going to say there's a deeper cosmic catastrophe meaning behind why the moon is turning red, and that there's a historical precedent for it. And then it's not a blood moon, but it's actual planetary upheaval, that a planet approaching the Earth would cause the moon to basically go incandescent red with heat. Like, think of it like a brake on a rotor. You know how race cars, when you're coming around a track and you see in the wheel, when they slam on those brakes and you have metal on metal or high friction and heat, they turn and glow red. I believe the moon will do that when the sun hides its face and this comet or planet or star approaches the Earth and the whole world freaks out. I think that's the catastrophe that we should be bracing ourselves for, that would mirror and match everything else going on in the scriptures, even the second coming or the first coming of Jesus Christ in the Book of Mormon. Prophet right now is telling us, everybody study 3rd Nephi. What's in 3rd Nephi but this catastrophe, that there was this giant upheaval of the earth and land after a sign in the sky, which was what? A star. And there were astrologers who followed the star when he was born, right? Like, Jesus came and there was a star in heaven. And I'm the weird one for talking about stars today. Like and anyways, so yeah, I get this, and this is typical.
It's not just that we're taking it down. It's just that the same narration as the woman with child, the same that is told in Egypt. That's the child, and they're saying that, this is just Nimrod trying to steal from Christ trying to steal from him. No, it's just the same story told of the same catastrophe, a planetary story told visually. It's in Egypt, it's in the Americas, it's the virgin birth of the twins, the mother with child in Egypt. Here in the Americas, there's also statuettes with the mother and child and milking in Egypt also. And this is just showing just his portions that he mentions he gets portion, but just to connect here with the same narrative of the planet that told the same story as also told in the scriptures, and it's also told in here in the same thread. Masonry kept in tradition with the Freemasons. That's why with George Washington and his practice of this Venus ritual, because it is the same planetary story, the same memory and stuff.
Because yes, all these cultures like he's bringing up, whether it's ancient Babylonian idolatry with Tammuz or whatever, right? Nimrod, who cares? They're all worshiping and misplacing their faith in objects or planets instead of Jesus Christ, instead of a man, a glorified man. This is why when I presented last week a 12-point list of like how to filter different paradigms. Well, if you're going to take the esoteric schizo view on the settling of America as being the satanic spawn of a new age government, which it is, by the way, but if that's the only way you see it, well, then you're going to be blind to what's actually going on. You're not. This is where I don't fault Kwaku for making a thread like that or for doing the research and coming back with these ideas, because they're out there and that is dangerous, I think. But it's not that I'm saying, hey, you don't do that because it's dangerous. I'm saying adjust the foundation, your perspective on how you're looking at this, and then look at it again, because you'll see it in a different light. All of the people, the Freemasons, those who believe in Kabbalah, Theosophy, or whatever it might be, they do believe they're setting up a one world government. They believe they're setting up a new millennium, a new Jerusalem, as the Bible would say. Like, they truly believe that. And that's true. That a lot of the Freemasons in early, like during the Revolution, we're going back to the French Revolution and the Illuminati and these ideas that they had of creating this idyllic society, this utopian society. Okay. When we talk about a utopia from the NWO and the Kingdom of Babylon, it's their mere representation of what Zion has been building for 200 years in a utopian millennial society based on the United Order. Again, so here we're back to this binary, which is good. I bring this up just to add some validity, because this was, for me, a huge moment when what I'm about to show you, and maybe you already know this, that's fine, but some of your listeners will see this, and hopefully it helps to let this stick in your brain a little bit more. I've been going off about Vilikovsky and these ideas and planets moving and all these ancient symbols and signs and stuff. But just look at this. I'm going to type in the Conference Center of the Church of Jesus Christ. The Church of Jesus Christ. Let's see if that pops up. Yep, here it is. We're going to zoom in on this. And I want you to just pay attention to some of the imagery and symbolism that is only visible from the roof. Okay. So if we, and let's make this 2D here. So we're going to go right up above the conference center. This is the conference center. Look, here's Temple Square right down here. And there's also some interesting symbols here once you get an understanding for what my perspective on what they're building there. But this is the conference center. And do you guys notice anything like obvious here? Like that it looks like there's maybe something built into it from the roof that you can only see from above. And there are 9 pyramids in this half crescent right here. You've got a circle at the top. This would be what I would call the omega sphere. And this is your alpha column. So you have alpha and omega. That's what the symbol is. I call it that, the alpha and the omega. This is also, some people have referred to it as the city of Enoch. They've referred to it as the cross, right? The Coptic cross even. This is the whole idea behind it. This is also the ancient planetary cross. If I zoom in, like you're going to have people accuse that as being a swastika, because there was this rotating sphere in the center of these planets when they pass by, and it looked like a whirlwind. They would call these passing bodies whirlwinds, right? So this wheel in heaven right here, this wheel that would spin is what it would. It would spin, and there would be a light column that came down, or a pillar of fire and a column of smoke. This symbol is archetypal in all of these spheres that we've been talking about. Okay, like it comes up repetitively in Freemasonic, esoteric, occult, secret society, mystery religion, schools, all of the things that you're not supposed to talk about or that they advise you to kind of stay away from because they might have dangerous ideas. It relates, and they have these same types of symbols. This symbol right here, this alpha and the omega. Same with all ancient mythologies. They show this symbol over and over again. Now, there's a group of scientists out there, academics, called the Thunderbolts Project. I mentioned these guys as Electric Universe type people. I'm just doing an image search for Thunderbolts group, right? And you see this right here. This recreation of theirs is a visualization of 3 planets in a line or in a conjunction close to the Earth. So this outer sphere here with a half crescent that you can see, it would rotate around the face of this planet. This planet was Saturn. The rayed white discharging star in the center, it's behind this red one. That was Venus. And then the red one in front is Mars. They created this configuration. It's called the polar configuration of planets based on comparative mythology to a high degree of specificity. A whole bunch of disparate accounts, okay? From Babylon to Egypt to South America to North America to Canada to everywhere, to Norse mythology and the tree of Yggdrasil and all of these things. And they reconstructed this figure based on those past mythologies of how the ancients, the fathers, like we've been talking about, used to describe the ancient heavens before and shortly after the flood. Okay, so like this image right here, and then let me find the perfect one where it shows. I have a folder on my other computer that has all these saved. I should pull up next time we talk or something with that one and just go through a lot of the images. But if I put polar configuration.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say for this. It's just the mentioning of the vocabulary that is in Quake's thread. It's not the chaos that has that thread of itself. I'm trying to say that the visual imagery is the same narrative that is told all around the world. It's the same birthing mythology. You can see virgin birth 600 years in the Popol Vuh than Christ, but it's the same planetary. They are the same characters of the same planets of the same story. It's the same story, the same visualization and order globally. that's just presented and verbally presented in fragments, also in Quaco's thread of the Venus with the 5 crown star, the red star.
Okay, here's a good one right here.
To the Americas also.
Here's another depiction of how this configuration of planets is often drawn. Okay, you have this plasma column that would come down between these planets and interact. Is what this is what this depiction is. Now this is real smooth and like obviously Photoshop, so it's not going to look exactly like this. But this idea of a star in the middle of a crescent, right? This goes back to what the Muslims have as their heraldry and stuff like that. This like I said, this idea and this imagery of these ancient planets. This goes back to the unmoved mover, even before they started this 600 BC philosophical destruction of this ancient understanding, of ancient Egyptian understanding of these occult things. This is why you have Freemasonry and all these other secret societies go underground during the time of Roman rule and stuff, because they had to preserve a lot of these more planetary focused ideas amidst the political upheaval that was happening in the kingdom of the world. Okay, so
let me show you something just real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Be 10 seconds, but I was looking at this when I was going into Theosophy and how it's been incorporated into the UN. Like you say, here's the main golden room of the UN.
Yes,
right here.
yes, they have this everywhere.
Yeah, and it's all. So he's not making that up.
This is
people who. Yeah.
This is ascension doctrine. Okay, and when I say ascension, I'm talking about these people think they are ascending to a higher illumination, a higher enlightenment, a higher consciousness, a higher body type by the actions that they make. They believe in an afterlife. These Satan worshipers, trust me, they know that there exists a metaphysical plane or a spiritual plane where entities exist, and they're inducing good karma on behalf of them to have success now and then be in their kingdom afterwards. Like it's a real, when you really get into what they believe in things, it's a direct parallel to what we believe in exaltation and ascension.
And part of the thing is that they're putting that golden thing that comes down right there is they're putting themselves as the thing that's coming into the it's this idea that they're the ones who are going to become the gods or are the gods, and they believe the theosophists, but it's so difficult when you get to that level of what you said, secret combinations of like what person believes the stuff all the way or not, but it's all over the place in there. But that's the exact imagery, and it was purposefully that exact imagery designed in that UN.
Or what was Kanye's last album? Kanye West, what was it called with album? It was like 2020 that it came out. Maybe it was before that. I can't remember. The image that he had is this same Alpha and Omega. Oh, I don't know where it is, but they'll do this a lot. It's the same. Jesus, when you see him depicted in the same formation with the circle and the cross behind him, right? Mm-hmm. And then he's standing as the polar column. He's standing as Mars in that picture. And this is why Rome and Remus and Romulus would have claimed descendancy from Mars, because this planet would often condescend down and come and interact with the Earth. And it would also do battle with Venus via lightning bolts. This is where like a lot of the Greek mythology between Ares and not Aphrodite. I can't remember. That's Greek. I'm mixing them up. Venus and Mars. Just the battles between Venus and Mars were witnessed because in this paradigm, this ancient esoteric occult paradigm, this was witnessed. Like it happened in close proximity to the Earth as all the planets were coming back into a new orbit around our sun. Because the idea behind this, and where Satanism and Saturn cosmology gets mixed up, is that this first sun was Saturn, and they called it the first sun, the perfect sun, the unmoved mover, because it hung in the north.
It's also in the Shriners.
Yeah,
their main symbol, kind of.
And in Hinduism, Buddhism, it's everywhere. It's visual. They are practice it. It's visual. It's everything, and it's the same vocabulary, same story, and same red image of what happened seen globally and brought here to as esoteric Buddhism, with all that stuff. It's the same images worn by people, with even George Washington. It's the same everywhere.
So this is a stela from ancient Carthage, again in the Middle East, way back. This would be during Phoenician, like Moses, Exodus times. And this is a depiction of Tammuz, okay, the star Venus. And it has this same crescent shape and some type of plasma. This is, okay, want to get technical, I would call this right here, this plasma beam that comes and interacts with the Earth. It's not going to be so uniform and look like this. It'll be diffuse. It'll be full of dark clouds, and it'll look scary when we see this happen, like a cometary tail hitting the Earth. That's what this is. Think of it as like Mars' cometary tail. But this also is the skirt that would have eventually come down and led the Israelites in the Exodus. So if we're looking at like LDS temple steeples, again, I brought this idea up. I just want to seal it with some visual here, that if we're looking at Moroni on the top of all of these, he depicts this same alpha and omega structure, because they all are going to have a ball for the most part that he stands on, a golden ball usually. And then you have the same alpha depiction. And yeah, there are numbers and symbols that you can detract or pull out as well and filter based on the number of points. Like this is usually an 8, symbolizing baptism as the portal and entrance up to this ascension, right? Like this is all here, and it's not me just wishfully making it up. These are built with these symbolic numbers in mind by sacred geometry and these types of things. Perhaps it's tradition on the side of the architects and the builders, but this tradition tracks back to this same imagery being this exact same type of stuff. And the exact same thing that you have here as Jacob's ladder or the stairway to heaven, right? This is the same thing. This is where you make your covenants and you enter into the covenant path and you go up into heaven. This would be the Garden of Eden, the 4 rivers and streams coming out from Eden. This would be a paradisical state. This would be a millennium. This would be Adam on Diamond. This would be, you see what I'm saying? How this could be so many things because it's fundamentally in the right place. If you put it fundamentally in the right place, everything else starts to tether to it. I don't have to do the effort. I'm not out here making new claims. I'm just saying, look, this stuff exists. Oh, look how it's associated. Oh, look how we use it. Oh, look how perfectly this fits into our paradigm. And even here, you've got 3 planets in a line about 23 degrees from horizontal here. And even this one has
the hanging
Venus.
star that I showed you.
Yeah, and it's got
That
Venus
inside the
on
temple.
it, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a
So-
Venus, the same Masonic inside square boxes, Venus inside it. As you said, a conference center has been established as a temple, and that's that where I show you the imagery of inside with the waterfall inside of it.
This is Philo Dibble we brought up last time that he had drawn, or he had a diagram that Joseph Smith drew, this one right here, of this same idea, right? These planets in a line or a stairway to heaven. These same ideas are all connected to this, right? That this is how the original Earth before the flood was configured. That it was a string with planets like pearls on the string, like pearls of great price, right? That they were on a string and that there was a governing planet that controlled them. So again, this is Joseph Smith to Philo Dibble, his bodyguard, and modern academic scholars of LDS, Dan McClellan probably doesn't even know about this, or if he does, he'd just poo-poo it because the source is dubious. But it's not. This guy's used in all other things that we do for church history and talking about the doctrine and covenants of the revelations that were received. But this one thing, no, even though it's notarized and he knew that people wouldn't believe him. Yeah. Well, the explanation he gives is that this middle planet was Earth, that there was a planet connected to the north, and that's where the lost tribes perhaps retreated to or were picked up by, like a planet that comes back. So this is where that conversation comes in. And again, if you want more information on this, in my essays on my Substack, Eternal Perspectives, I don't know which episode it is. It might be episode 6 at this point in Restoration of Cosmology. I go over all of the lost tribe claims about an extraplanetary origin.
Is that what Michael Rush kind of his take is?
Yes.
Is it similar? Same?
Yes. So
because I know he's talked a lot about that. So
this is, okay, that's perfect. Thank you for bringing it back because I get lost in the weeds.
So, yeah.
I could talk about this symbolism and stuff for days, but Michael Rush.
I probably ought to. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I probably ought to wrap this up pretty soon. So, like, maybe we could segue into the Ezra Eagle stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, and thank you because like I said, I get very passionate about these symbols and stuff because when you start to see things as the symbols they are and how they associate to what we're doing in the temple and what's being taught in our doctrine, it becomes exciting and becomes delicious. Like I feast on this stuff. It's not a chore to study. But yeah, Michael Rush. And I'll stop sharing those. Michael Rush is the first one to go in on Ezra's eagle in these latter days. And this is a prophecy that wasn't even really, we weren't able to understand it until Donald Trump. Okay. And let me pull up the feathers because this is probably an image that you guys are all familiar with, Ezra's eagle. And so I brought this up a little bit that this has relation to Daniel's vision in Daniel 7. Okay, this is an older picture, but this will be a good one. I don't know who this guy is, but bless him. Okay, so this prophecy, like I said up at the beginning, it is in the Apocrypha. So if you're wanting to read this for yourself, I encourage you to do it. You could read it in 15 minutes, I promise. And so many people will not read this. It blows my mind. They're like, Leland, what do you think about this? Or what do you think? Or doesn't it say this? And I'm like, did you not read it? Like, just read it. Just read it. So if you read through it, it paints this story. And I'm going to do... just my explanation. We won't read it. I'll make you guys do that as homework.
I've read it. You've read it, Kevin, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And then my message is for those listening because they'll think they're now experts just having listened to our commentary on it, and that's not how scriptures work. So
I'm for sure no expert, but I've read through it.
Perfect. So it sets up this idea that in the latter days, and it even makes a direct comparison that this is the kingdom that Daniel saw in the latter days that wasn't expounded to him. He didn't know more about this. Only you, Ezra, are learning about this. So it's a prophecy you don't get anywhere else except in the Apocrypha. And it's the King James Version Apocrypha that I use and that Prout uses and that Michael Rush uses when I know it says Prout here, but Michael Rush was the first one to write a book.
Yeah,
about this.
I first heard it actually through Prout, but a lot of people say, so I don't know who came first, Prout or Rush.
It's Rush in his book, A Remnant Shall Return. And this one's free. If you guys haven't read this one yet, A Remnant Shall Return.
I haven't
He's
read
got
any,
it
like,
in the
books. I've only
podcast.
read the Apocrypha and then heard from Kevan some of the things.
Yeah, he's got it all on audio in like on Apple Podcasts and everything.
Yeah,
so
you don't have to buy it. Don't buy it.
It's free.
He wants you to listen to it, and it's good. I disagree with some of his points on Enoch and when they return and stuff, just because of my cosmic layer. But I love Michael Rush. Anytime he puts a video out, I'm eating it up. I want to watch it because he's along the same vein of understanding what's happening with the second coming.
Is that the one you've sent me? I've seen one or two from.
I've sent you some of his stuff. Yeah.
So in 2016, when Donald Trump wins the presidency and collectively the global world order turned and targeted him, and you could feel the momentum switch, that politically.
That didn't happen.
Well, but that moment,
the indictment was last night.
That moment, though, is only being reinforced with the indictment of last night or whatever it might be, with them still going after this guy to get him out of this situation. And again, I'm not out here and people are going to run and be like, oh, he's a MAGA Trumper, QAnon, or blah, blah, blah. Like, just get out of here with that. I've already told you what I am, that I'm seeing things through a prophetic perspective. Okay. So like I can integrate QAnon or liberal movements or Maoism or communism, whatever it is. I can integrate them all. I don't have to not look at any of them because they're dangerous. Like that's the whole point of having this as a weapon and defense.
I don't think anybody has any evidential leg to stand on to not say that whatever deep state thing that you may call the deep state, which isn't even seemingly deep state anymore because they've revealed themselves so hard, that entire thing went after Donald Trump in a ridiculous way. I don't think you can argue against that today unless you're just buried in MSNBC and that's all you watch. But.
Yeah, one side of the propaganda. And that's unfortunately a lot of people find themselves in that position because they don't have time. They don't have time to research. They're strapped to a job. They've got family obligations, things like that. And so they don't get into it unless they get compelled to, like they get embarrassed in a conversation or something happens in their life where it forces them to like revisit what they believe on these things. I mean, it's not fun. It's not fun to do, like to constantly deconstruct what you believe and fix it. But when you have a proper framework, like I'm presenting and why I'm so passionate about showing this to people, it's actually easy and fun. And that's why I'm trying to go to such lengths to kind of share all this stuff. So the prophecy starts this way. And who started it first, whatever. I believe Michael Rush was the first one with his book. And then James Prout, his book, Last Days Timeline. I own it too. So I'm not like, I don't like Prout as much because he's very salesy in his approach and like teaching things. So I don't like that. So I don't listen to him. I don't care what he's saying anymore in his newsletters. I'm proud. No offense to him. He's probably a great person.
No, I did the same thing.
But the initial revelation is what I'm excited about. That this scripture was brought to light.
Sells stuff, like he sends out like some sort of letter of selling.
Yeah, he's got a newsletter and like a book and all this stuff, and he just kind of seems to be pushing those products.
Is he LDS? He's LDS.
Yeah.
I would say,
his presentations, original presentations aren't bad at all. They're really.
Why does it generally seem to be an LDS thing that's picking up on Ezra's ego? Wouldn't this be something that would be pick upable by?
I've seen some other Christian commentaries on it, and a lot of them will point back to like this being like ancient Rome and stuff like that. And
I mean, it's the Apocrypha and all that stuff's not like an LDS text.
But it's really only in the LDS paradigm that this is.
I would say it's because of our association or our understanding and belief in the Book of Mormon and secret combinations that this is even more highlighted, that these eagle heads that it describes cover or basically manipulating all of these presidents up until this wing, up until our current history where we're at right now, our current timeline. We're in a current conflict between the secret combinations that have been setting up their foundation for hundreds of years, actually. Like that's what this, in my opinion, witnesses to. They're now in conflict with some troublemakers.
So and they're newsflash, everybody, every president we've had has been a puppet president.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why I don't play politics. Like people will label me everybody, oh, Desnat, you're all right winger, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you don't understand. Like I am full in on the gospel and that secret combinations are real. And Ezra Taft Benson, he pointed us to read a book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen. right? That book specifically outlines the formation of the CFR in the early 1900s as the beginning of the downfall of our government. And I would go back even further to Jekyll Island and 1913 and the establishment of the Federal Reserve, because this is where Babylon banking comes in. They come in, they spit a central bank. Now rewind our conversation of Babylon anciently in Greece and Rome and what they were doing with the temple in Jerusalem at the time of the first coming and the usury that was going on at the temple, right? And Christ cleaning the temple. Like this whole stuff is repeated, and it's happened again here in the United States, in this promised land, that a Federal Reserve nasty Babylon bank has come in, has totally disrupted our financial system. And I would argue that every world war after that bank was instituted was intentionally started, manipulated, and managed by these same Babylon bankers. That it was First World War I was positioning and getting everything up in line, and the CFR established so that they had a talon stuck into our American presidency. And Hoover, the first president, he was pivotal in making this happen. He was not a founding member. I think I misspoke in my original video doing this, but he supported the CFR in its creation monetarily and in getting them set up to begin with. And then FDR ran with it. Ran with the CFR, basically gave them every right to and access to the government. And then from then on, every president or key advisors going forward were members of the CFR and embedded in the secret combination going forward. The only ones to push back against this were Kennedy and Reagan in their respective times. Now, they're just as corrupt as everyone else. Like, they're just as corrupt as you would say Donald Trump is today, or anybody we're talking about, Joe Biden, right? But because they went against these secret combinations, they were eliminated. They were a short feather. So in the prophecy, it talks about long feathers versus short feathers. It refers to the time of rule of each of these presidents over this American continent, over this eagle kingdom. And it starts with Hoover. And then the way we know that it starts with Hoover is that the second feather it describes, it says it serves twice as long as anybody before or after it. So nobody serves as many terms as king or president over this nation as the second feather does. And if we want to get into the history of it, that's exactly what FDR did. He served 4 terms, or was elected in 4 terms as a president. And it was during his presidency that the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, which restricts time on presidential candidates or on presidents to 2 terms, it restricts your time in office. It fulfills exactly that part of the prophecy. That's very specific. That talks about, at this point, this second feather serves twice as long, and nobody before or after him serves the same. So that's how we place all of these presidents going forward, that FDR would have been that second longest feather. And then from then on there, it goes on and describes 14 feathers that basically serve all of the points that are needed by these 3 secret combination eagle heads. In the prophecy, these heads are sleeping the whole time. This bird, this eagle, it flies across the seas. So this is the same eagle that Daniel sees in his vision being stripped from the lion from Britain. This would be Ephraim and Manasseh coming over to Joseph's land here in America. And again, this has to do with the founding of America and the Constitution and what George Washington knew when he put his hand on the Bible, on the blessing and covenant of Joseph coming over the wall, growing over the wall. So all of these things were known by these Freemasons, by these Bible studiers, that this land over here was a promised land to Joseph's seed. And so this kingdom coming over is this eagle. But a voice comes from this eagle from the body, which represents the people, the voice of the people. And that's how our democracy should work. The Book of Mormon talks about that it should be by the voice of the people on this land that all things are done. But these secret eagle heads are controlling things, and they're asleep until right at our time in history. So these guys dutifully serve as puppet presidents from Hoover all the way up to Barack Hussein Obama. And then from him, Here, I'm going to give you a real conspiracy rabbit hole that'll just discredit myself from
what's the idea of, just help me to remember or see this, what's the idea between the switching of the sides of the wings?
Yeah. So this is where, basically, think of it. Well, I like how this picture depicts it, because you can fly with full feathered wing over here on this side, but this one, they're all short, and you're not going to be flying the same way that the heads would like you to go. So the idea is the short feathers, and this whole side is filled with short feathers. Right. They don't follow the plan of the 3 eagle heads the way that the eagle heads want it to be followed. That's essentially what it is. It doesn't mean that they're good, that we need to see JFK as a good guy, although he plays a positive role in this story, in that he does eventually wake up and oppose them and then is killed for it. Do you get what I mean? Like, he comes around and is like, oh, shnikes, these are bad people, and we need to shatter the CIA to 1 million pieces and blah, blah, blah. And then he gets killed. So that's what it is. The short feathers and the switching of the arms, it in the prophecy, it indicates that from here on out, it's going to be a constant battle between these two until they basically destroy themselves, until it says the eagle is burned. So Donald Trump, he comes in, it says he would be removed from office, and then the next one to assume his role, and this is an old picture, that's why it would have Pence. They were assuming Trump would have been removed from office by impeachment. Like they tried so many times. They tried everything to get him. Now, in my perspective, looking at all this, just like JFK and Reagan and others are embedded in the machine, I believe Donald Trump has been in the machine his whole life, and that he is, let's say, a faction within. Okay, that he represents a faction within our military, within our government, within our economy, in like the trade and everything and business, that is opposed to the ultimate end direction of these three eagleheads. Doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he says. I think a lot of his America First policies and things are actually in the right direction, that we need to get back to the Constitution, that we need to get back to that kind of rule. And I recognize that's what he was doing, and that's what drew the ire of all of this communist establishment going forward, that he was a danger to democracy. No, their democracy, the way that they had set it up, which isn't really democracy, but a smooth socialism, communism that they have instilled essentially in our nation. I believe these active measures are far more advanced than many are willing to admit, that we're far more into communism, socialism now than it appears. That people think there's a fighting chance that we can get out of it. I don't think so. I think this prophecy and everything says that like the flaxen cord of the devil has already basically constricted our air in this regard. So the prophecy says that the next one after Donald Trump is removed, or this president, the 15th president is removed, this short eagle feather, he's away sooner than the first. So this one, who would now be Joe Biden, not Pence, he is supposed to leave in a manner sooner than Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump was removed via, and this is going to be controversial as well, but again, from my perspective, it just makes sense, and it was obvious that he was removed via malicious ways. Fraud in the election or manipulation of electoral systems, information, propaganda, all of it. It was everything was deployed to get this guy out of office, and is still being deployed. Hence the indictment.
Now we don't have to get canceled on YouTube because we can talk about.
Yeah, you're allowed to say it now. But Time Magazine bragged about it. They called it
fortifying. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this again, if you're following along with this paradigm and understanding, and you believe in the Bible, you believe that America needs to be cleansed of sin, just like our scriptures in the Book of Mormon say, and like Ezra Benson essentially like shouted from the rooftop, guys, they're here. The secret combination trying to take over the world is here, and they've been in our government and they're doing work, and we need to wake up. Like that was his message, and then he was shout down. Oh, you're an old man, you have no idea. But now look where we're at, where men don't know if they're women or not. You know what I mean? Like this is exactly communist subversion to the T. So. The next one's supposed to be removed further away than Trump. So I'm expecting, and Michael Rush talks candidly about this too, that the timeline on this is that Joe Biden has to be removed before 4 years are up, before his official term is up. They've got to pull him out of office sooner than they pulled Donald Trump, because he served one term. And in my opinion, and in the opinion of millions of people, Donald Trump would have served a second term had the voice of the people been heard. I believe he was more popular and ingrained himself with the people than any of these other presidents, to be honest. And
no way. Everybody loves Biden. Everybody's
well, yeah, 81 million votes.
He's the most popular president ever.
Think about that Biden received more votes than this guy, Barack Obama, the pinnacle of their rise to propaganda. And that's what and think of that in terms of what was happening during the 2012 Obama presidency. They basically made propaganda legal again to be used against the American people by the government. So since 2012, if you notice that things have gone crazier since 2012 and now in terms of what people believe in the news and what's being shared, I believe that there's a real nefarious reason for that, and that our government is involved. But we're seeing a war come to the head of that right now politically, that this all is playing out, and whether or not this prophecy comes to pass is really hinging on Joe Biden's presidency right now. He's got to be removed sooner than he would have fulfilled his full term. Now, there are several special counsels right now that are investigating him for crimes, bribery, all kinds of stuff
coming up.
So it'll be a stroke. That's what it's going to be.
It could be. Yeah, it could be that they pull him out or they kill him, or he pretends he has dementia even more and just says like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Don't put me in jail. I'm not bad. You know, like that's, I totally see that they will stop at nothing because they're caught. All of these people are caught, and we're going to have a conflict like this. There's going to be a counterpunch from what they did to Trump, from him and his factions and stuff coming back, that I believe causes this next frustration and confusion that goes on at this point in the prophecy. So at this point, when Joe Biden is removed, one of the eagle heads wakes up, the one in the middle. So for hundreds of years, nobody has really admitted or been able to say, yes, okay, sure, there's a secret government controlling the United States. They can always poo-poo me and be like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're dangerous for democracy, Leland. Right? But now
it's becoming more common, the common perspective now that people think that.
Which again is only, to me, somebody who adopted and jumped onto this bandwagon looking at this prophecy and was excited about it back in 2017, 2018, like years ago. And people, I honestly left Facebook because I had people I knew that were in wards here in Phoenix that I had lived with and stuff shouting me down on Facebook for sharing this kind of stuff, saying, we don't believe in that, Leland. You can't take that seriously. Blah, blah, because they thought I was getting overtly political to be like, look what's going on, guys. It is happening. Like, prophecy is happening. And all you can think about is left versus right, Trump versus this, MAGA versus that. You know, it's just like you're living in their Hegelian dialectic. When I'm seeing it from a prophetic standpoint, that prophecy is literally being fulfilled, and I can rejoice in that. You know what I mean? Like, that's ultimately that's where this serves a benefit.
So there's a couple different channels. One's called like Praise of Folly and Jay Dyer. They have their own general religious beliefs, but they're not really religious channels. But Jay Dyer goes through so much stuff through the past 100 years that's just written out in plain open sight. And one of the most famous writers who wrote about this stuff is Anthony C. Sutton. He's got these couple different books, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Did Wall Street Fund FDR, Hitler, and the Bolsheviks? And there's a lot of different ideas. That another one's Quigley and some different people, but there's way more than that. That it's not hidden. Like it's only been kind of shoveled off to a side or been encouraged to not look at. But what everything he's saying as far as the past goes, that there is a uniparty and a secret combination, but they're only secret in the sense that they yelled it from the rooftops and bragged about it in all their books and said it in all the things that I talked about last podcast about the eugenics and how they have all these different ideas of depopulating the earth and all that. And they it's too much to even start to shake a stick at, just try to tell people of all the different things that you can read and see and hear, where the different people have almost kind of like when you talk about the World Economic Forum, people say, oh, someone's conspiracy theory. Well, you can go read it and listen to it and listen to their conferences every single time. So like calling the stuff conspiracy theory almost kind of boggles the mind, because it's been in plain sight the whole time. They can't help but brag, just like on that Time magazine. They can't help but brag about the things that they're doing, or say it in plain sight, or write books about it, or have some ghostwriter write a book about the things. And it's been going on for 100 years. So it's not tales out of school. You can see them from their own mouths say the ideas and the things that they're doing. But I mean, I guess it's just because of the media and how it's presented in the media that we don't know that there is an eagle's head there. But
mind control.
Yeah.
Everybody brainwashed. Remember we talked about that last episode, and that's what this is for. That this is the good brainwash to see through it. Because I feel like I do. I'm not affected by, like, emotionally, I'm not affected by what's going on politically at all. In fact, I'm excited because I, like the prophet, like President Nelson, everybody's like, we're being taken over by communists. How the heck is he able to just say blah 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 and be all flowery and give us fluff? I'm like, well, if you're seeing it from this perspective, that the temple is the true government, and that the mission of the church is not to stop communism. The mission of the church is not to save America. The mission of the church is not to remove the war in Ukraine and Russia. The mission of the church is not these things, guys. It never was. The mission of the church has always been to bestow and dispense the covenants of God and the temple ordinances and everything that goes on in there to the world, to make them available, to prepare the earth for the second coming, for destruction. So we are an Adventist church.
To be there when this thing goes up in flames.
Yes.
They're not trying to make it go up in flames. They're not the dangerous ones. They're the ones who will be the net that's there if you are prepared yourself properly. I don't know what sort of term, to be something that can be caught by the net, but they will be what's there when this stuff kills itself.
The one time when Slate was right.
They're not making it happen. They're not the dangerous ones. They're the ones trying to build something to be there when the danger happens from these governmental idiots. And in the meantime, most people going and leaving religions go and become statists. So you basically go and become part of this religion instead of the one that's actually going to bring about stupid crap. And the one that's just kind of sitting and waiting and biding its time and building itself up for when that stuff dies. Oh, that's the scary one. Well, the other one's creating it into the boogeyman, that it's the scary thing that's going to blow everything up.
the positive thing about the end of this Ezra's eagle prophecy, and I'll just quickly go through what happens next. But at the end, it says the eagle's burned. So there's going to be war. There's going to be a removal and a cleansing of America, as we believe, in fact, should happen, just like in the Book of Mormon, where all the righteous Nephites or Lamanites at the time, they had to band together and get rid of the Gadiantans. They had to purge them from the land before Christ could come down with destruction and kill the wicked. And then the righteous remained to set up a Zion millennial society that lasted 3 generations or 300 years. So that's a mini archetype of what our mission here in America is leading up into the second coming. There's going to be destruction. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be collapse of government. That all is inevitable. And in the I call it the
some of this stuff, it felt like before 2020, it almost felt nuttier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's like, who on earth can sit there and say that there's not some sort of wackadoo machinations with net zero stuff going on, and the vaccines for some sort of a universal virus that they've gone about creating, but it's just a big dumb accident. But at this point, like, is it crazy to think that anybody's a prepper and all you're doing with this church is like the major prepper that's an entire church? And it used to be a sneering, laughy thing to say, how can we be prepping? I don't think anybody in their right mind can stop and look around right now and say prepping is not a good idea for what's about to blow up.
Especially after the great toilet paper shortage of 2020.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think after that, people are open to this idea of global conspiracy, which is great. Yeah. It's awesome to me because now I'm not getting attacked by friendlies. Like, well, I still am, actually, to be honest. But it's not as bad.
Oh, there'll still be people just saying, no, you're going to
So here's what gets interesting is when Joe Biden gets removed, right? The prophecy says that the next two that think to rule, so they don't even get to rule. It says they think to rule and place themselves in. So if Joe Biden gets removed, let's say he gets removed by a stroke or something where he's out of office and there's a continuity, what is it called? Secession issue, right? And you have the Vice President Kamala Harris. Well, she's not fit. But now imagine it's a legal trap. It's a legal thing where these people are actually prosecuted by our Department of Justice. There's some house cleaning. There's internal fighting that gets unleashed. That could trap both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and even the Speaker of the House, who would be the next in line, right? You would think that they're going to try and position people, if they're going to remove Joe Biden, to put their guy in next, right? But now that you've got all these factions awake and fighting each other almost out in the open, like with Donald Trump and his people and adjacents and everybody else, and you've got psyops going on, it's 5th generation warfare, which is psychological, right? So it's all information at this point. I believe that's what we're watching and witnessing, is that you have this internal battle right now for who's going to take the spot when they remove Joe Biden. I think it's already decided that the powers that be and the propaganda machine have already cast enough doubt on Joe Biden to say, like, well, he might get removed. Oh, he's got some bad stuff too, some skeletons in his closet. We need to get somebody else in there, right? Like, that's the whole idea. But according to this prophecy, neither of them make it. There's some type of happening. Something happens to where this eagle head wakes up, announces himself, and it says it eats up the two that think to rule. So this eagle head wakes up, a secret combination wakes up, and literally prevents the next two people after Joe Biden from taking office, and takes office himself. Okay. Now it says this head puts the whole world in terror. So you're going to have people calling this the Antichrist. Don't fall for it. You already have people calling Elon Musk or Barack Obama or Donald Trump, or, they're calling all these feathers the Antichrist, and they're not. They're all misnomers up until the very end, right? The very end after all these feathers and heads is when I believe the Antichrist shows up. So you have this head come in, he eats these two, he rules for a short time. It's even suggested that he goes to war in the Middle East right after. So, I mean, that's kind of setting up and simmering right now with everything going on the last several years with Iran and all of the buildup that's happening there with Afghanistan. I could see a scenario where you have some type of political revelation that removes Joe Biden, removes the next two, and you have some military person come in and go in and just go ham on the world and put fear in the rest of the world. So this is the kind of stuff that this prophecy suggests is happening right in front of us. And yet you have people arguing about who knows what on Twitter. And this is why I get so dejected often, where I'm just like, what the is going on? Like, where is our focus? Because if we have a prophetic timeline, we should be eating up all this time that we have while society seems to be peaceful. While peace has not quite been taken from all the earth, although we've got global war and wars and rumors and wars, and people just go about their day, right? The continuation of this, the final ending of this is that this head is murdered by this head. This head then gets murdered shortly thereafter by that head.
Which ones?
It just says one, like the head on the left eats the head on the right, and then the head on the right eats that head. So they start to eat each other, and it talks about murder, like that these people are murdered in their sleep, in their bed, in a war, and whatever it might be. Like these heads die, and then after they die, there is a short time where 2 last feathers rule and reign during like total upheaval here in America. So we're looking, if we're taking this prophecy seriously, we're looking at the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 presidents or kings of this American continent before it says the eagle's burned, and then it says it's restored to its roots. The next prophecy in Ezra talks about how that happens, that there's a lion that comes out. It rebukes the Antichrist and this corrupt government. It protects the chosen people of God. It calls down the 10 tribes. Like all of this stuff happens, and it's not Rome. I'm sorry. Like this isn't a past happening. This is the last days. This is the second coming of Christ that Ezra is seeing. So like, this is where I'm so confident that, hey, we're watching this happen. It's amazing. I've been watching it for several years, like even before Donald Trump was removed, and I saw all this happen, and it's only confirmed it to me. It's only confirmed it more and more and more. And so if you're doing that, if you're aware and like with eyes to see and ears to hear, your testimony and heart will be lifted up through this so that you will be a benefit to those around you who are confused, who are maybe falling for the esoteric thread bro black pills that, oh, all of it's evil. We're all evil. Even the church is bad. That's going to happen. And you're going to have it get louder and louder and louder as all of this goes on. So this is my cry and plea that I can see this. I saw this from a distance long time ago, that people would be deceived by these secret combinations and this occult doctrine, right? That is that is planetary in essence. And if we're not prepared to combat that with the truth that we have in the temple and what we know to be true, well, the Lord's going to be disappointed that he sent us down in this time and we totally failed with all of the information available to us. That's the way I feel. That's the pressure that I feel. And that's exactly why I go to these great lengths to like make myself look crazy and be attacked by all kinds of people, even people that I would be friends with. Right. And I would love to be friends with Kwaku. I would love to get on this and talk real about like what I believe and stuff and not just shout at each other, because I have no intention of doing that. I don't want to be enemies with anybody. I never wanted to be labeled evil as a desnat to begin with, but I got caught up in this. And I know that anybody who stands up to speak truth is going to be caught up in this. You're not going to get away from it. You're not going to get away from being called evil or a cultist or whatever it might be and being a high priest and a king unto Jesus Christ, just like he was. You're not getting away from the same scourging, right? You're not, and none of us are. And how dare we think that we can receive the same type of glory and forgiveness and amazing blessings that he has in store for us and mansions in heaven if we don't put in that work and put ourselves out there to at least understand this stuff, to be a help to those around us when it all goes to crap. This was Ezra Taft Benson's cry. And this is what Joseph Smith saw, and that when all this collapses, when the eagle is destroyed and you have it burned and returned to its roots and foundations, who's going to know the Constitution well enough to implement that? Who's going to have a form of governance and a social system and a network and a united order, right, to be able to implement freedom of religion and freedom of government, just like we believe? Yeah, we believe government should be a part, and a monarchical theocracy is the ultimate end goal with Christ as the king. Absolutely, right? But even in that form of government, Christ allows you to worship whatever you want. Even in the millennium, people will exist and live that do not worship Jesus Christ, but they accept the rules and laws of the millennium of Zion. Right? This is true. This is doctrine. This is not Leiland making stuff up again, trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole. No, fix your foundation. From this foundation, I see perfectly clear. And I see that we are heading into this blind for the most part as a general membership. And that's where I see like comments from President Nelson that you will not survive spiritually what's coming in the coming days. Those are prophetic statements with gravity. But you have everybody just kind of like, well, whatever. Yeah, you got to have the Holy Ghost. But I'm talking, no, you're going to see things that will literally challenge your worldview. That will begin to take place, not just at the governmental level where you're like, wow, I didn't expect any of this to happen. I'm talking planetary physics level. That's why I go to at lengths to talk about electric universe and these fantastical things that people have a hard time believing in the Bible. Well, it's because right now the condition of the earth is relatively static. Wait till the energy starts pouring in. Wait till things start moving around. Think of the solar system like a molecule. And as it changes, you have different atoms or electrons start to change place, and it changes. It can transmute into something new. That's what paradise in the millennium is. That's what's going to happen. In my view, I'll say, I'm not condemning anybody for not believing these crazy things that Leiland believes. But at the same time, I read the scriptures. Do you? Because these are all over the scriptures. This talk of planets, this talk of cosmology, this talk of destruction, this talk of catastrophe, it always precedes and brings the red carpet for the King of Kings and the Lord of Hosts, the Lord of planets and power and control and force and government, right? He's going to make an entrance when he comes. It's not hippie Jesus riding in on the pride flag. I'm sorry.
Nothing to be sorry about.
That's Ezra's eagle in a nutshell, in that it's just one. just one prophetic piece from the Apocrypha that people throw away and it's in a closet somewhere that not a lot of people know about. But think about it in this context when you're looking at the macroscape and how this prophecy fits perfectly into what's happening right now in this American government, in what the Book of Mormon witnesses and testifies, and what Ezra Taft Benson left out all on the table, balls to the walls. Forgive me, Prophet. That he laid it all out there to show us that these secret combinations are real in our American government, and to say, wake up, all is not well in Zion. That's my spiel.
Yeah.
Sticking to it. Again, we could go a lot into Emmanuel Vilikovsky more.
Because
I see him playing a role in all of this as well. Like the governmental, Daniel, political aspect of it, the Ezra's Eagle aspect of it is awesome because I don't get caught up in the Donald Trump stuff. I followed the QAnon stuff as it was coming out, but I didn't get caught up into it because I didn't take it as a prophet. I didn't take it as anything other than a propaganda, psyop in this same info war and psychological warfare that's going on. You've got the government turning its own people against each other and against their own political enemies. That's what you have. You have both sides of the uniparty ingratiating or ingraining themselves with the general public to an extent that they can clobber their political opponents with them. I think that's a trend that that Obama did with the help of the machine, and then Trump came in against the machine doing the same thing, ingraining himself to the public and using the people as a voice to push back against the eagle heads. So that's where I say don't get caught up in what's going on. I say support those people who are supporting the Constitution. Absolutely. Fight the people who are identifying and fighting communists. I think that's true. Like, we need to do that. But I don't think we should be identifying ourselves with any of these offshoot political movements. I said it from the beginning. If you want to check my Twitter threads as well, that like the QAnon, I believe there's a lot of real truth coming out of that stuff because it's tying together a lot of these government conspiracies, but that it's a psyop itself. It's going to fail. According to these prophecies, how can I believe it?
They end up it's like you say, those esoteric other, like the bad guys, let's say, will always show their hand, and so they're the ones that are oftentimes revealing the truth to us. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I've kind of been the same thing. It's like I've always taken any conspiracy theory with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? Or anything out there, and it's interesting because like you, I've been on the trail of this for a while, and I was on other trails, you know, before I knew about the Ezra's Eagle stuff. But like, it's just like, I'm just going to take it with a grain of salt. It's not like this stuff wasn't prophesied of. That's how I always looked at it. I was like, it's not like I didn't hear this when I was in 9th grade seminary studying the Doctrine and Covenants. You know what I mean? This is stuff that I remember learning about back in 9th grade, you know, and
the scriptures say all nations will fail. All nations will collapse before the coming of the Son.
I mean, Chris will tell you there's times when I'll get caught up in it, you know, and I get kind of black pilled and stuff like that. But I'm like always like, you know, and Chris will tell you, I've gone to him I'm like, dude, we're so screwed. The only way out of this is through Jesus, man.
Yeah, I agree. Like, my paradigm is like, yes, that's it. That's the only answer. I think if
I'll put on. Go ahead. Let me.
I was gonna keep riffing on garbage stuff. So you go.
Well, I was just gonna say you can always take these ideas, as I'm usually talking to ex-Mormons and atheists and all that sorts of stuff, that you can take it from an angle of, okay, you don't believe in the prophecy, you don't believe in these things or whatever. Your people who you shouldn't hate don't have the most dangerous views in the world, but how could any of these sorts of ideas, which pragmatically have the concept behind them of don't trust this really crappy government that you have right now, maybe that would have been bad if it really was some sort of benevolent government, but I think you should be able to parse out right now that it isn't. But you should be able to look at all this and say, hey, it's probably true that this stuff's all going to blow up. You can do your empirical sources of go look into different studies of how everything's blowing up and imploding in multiple different ways, and that there are secret combinations or intentional ideas to do that sort of thing. And why not look back to your community or your sorts of people and how you can get outside of that or survive beyond it or whatever. What I'm just saying is all of this could be not you could take this from the framework that it doesn't have the spiritual or eternal or predictive idea behind it, and it would still be pragmatically positive angle to take.
Be skeptical of your government, of your totalitarian communistic government. Yeah.
And get ready to, if you survive through that, join up with your community and your people who've been preparing for this.
That's the coolest part to witness this myself as a member, like an aware member of the church that sees society like this, because it is a witness again to me, like another testimony building thing, to watch so many different factions outside of the church take that attitude, take that understanding of the world. Like, oh crap, we need to build societies. We need to get down to family. We need to get back to the basics, to the building block of these societies, because it could downfall. Like everybody's comparing right now, America, what's going on, to the downfall of Rome. Well, if you're not prepared to set up again cities after a collapse of a nation like that, like how are you going to survive? What's your plan? Like that, it is a testament again to me to see everybody having these conversations like you bring up, that it's not uncommon now for these types of things to happen. I had this thought as you're talking, and I have a whole article on this rooftop symbol on my Substack here, but I've just pulled it out. I just want to visually show you that this is the same symbolism as the throne of God, and the earth in that context. When you talk about the throne, the earth is always referred to as the footstool. Okay, so that God sets his feet upon the earth in his throne. Now, in this planetary alignment, where you're looking at literally planets that are stacked in a polar alignment, the earth would have been the last one in that column. And this is why, looking up from the earth, you would have seen what they called this as the heaven man, or the son of man, because when the crescent was down at the bottom, it looked like two arms upraised. And this is why you have all ancient prayers and things going up to the north with your arms upraised and looking up, right? Or even repeating it 3 times is interesting in terms of what we know and do as in relation to this ancient configuration and man. But these are depictions of the second coming from outside Latter-day Saint sources. So these are people who read Revelation. The book of chapter 4 is the entire throne room scene in John's vision, where he sees the millennium. He sees the earth crystallized. He sees the Lord standing on it, essentially, or sitting on it, and his feet on it. And it creates, again, the same Alpha and Omega structure, with you have the 4 beasts, or the 4 winds or wings, or like all these things are represented symbolically in the same idea of him returning back. And here you have the stairway and the Alpha Omega rainbow, Saturn rings behind him. Like all of these things are always there. And here's a reverse image I love, where it shows him on his throne standing, or with the earth as its footstool, and him coming down. So again, like from this perspective, and again, I've got scriptures and all kinds of stuff, or even this take the tabernacle for what it is, that this is a triple mountain, that this is the same polar configuration right here, with these columns of plasma that would come down and the planet coming down. And what are these but organs that make tons of sound, like they experienced at Sinai, where they were afraid to go up to the mountain with Moses when he invited all of them up to come and speak to God, to go to the temple. And no, there were scary sounds and trumpets, is what they said. It sounded like coming from the mountain, as well as it shook and it was big. And that's exactly what this organ does. I don't know if you've ever sat near it, like when it's going off and it's playing full bore or whatever, like it shakes the building. It's meant to make sound and shake and change the vibration of your heart, of how you're experiencing things. That's exactly what the tabernacle is in my mind. Like I see it everywhere. You start to see it in the temple. You start to see it in the symbols. You start to see it in the rituals we do with the Hosanna shout, with all of these things. I have a lot of, you can read on that. I geek out on this. You can see it if you just go through and visually look at all the temples looking down. It's got this same structure where you have, if you imagine Christ as being the man in the middle, right? The cross in the middle, the center where the celestial room would be. And then you have the earth depicted down below here in its 4 quarters with him standing on it. And then here you have heaven, the all-seeing eye, the heaven above, and Christ intermediary in between it. But it's this same polar planetary structure with the earth at the bottom, at the footstool, represented. Or you can even turn it sideways and see arms upraised here with a heaven man, right? Like I go to any temple, you can see. Now, some temples are simple architecture and don't have these aerial symbols built in, but there's too many for it to be coincidence when you're looking down and seeing these same esoteric Saturnian type symbols that, again, only strengthen my position. They only bolster what I'm trying to present, that we've got this ancient history, that we've got this ancient tradition that nobody even realizes. And they won't realize it until the rest of the world collapses in their pride cycle. And that's exactly what we're kind of waiting on. And that's why the prophet says, get to the temple. Those who take the temple seriously, take their priesthood covenant seriously, they're the only ones that are going to be able to have the gifts of the Spirit during the millennium that the Lord's going to pour down when stuff goes crazy. And that's how I see this. So it's more real to look at it this way and to incorporate what we actually do and see and have with our temples and what we're supposed to be focusing on, what the prophet's pointing to, instead of criticizing every move the brethren are making and criticizing everything about the vaccine and how come they're doing this with Babylon and how come this and that and they're totally lost. No, they're not. If they were lost, they would not be producing and making temples and buildings and talking about the doctrines of the temple like they are, because that's what prophets do before a catastrophe. So that's my spiel. Again, I'd love to talk more about electric universe, specific theories, questions, anything else that goes on. It connects to literally everything. So I have to just stop myself.
Yeah, well, we can get back to more of it in the future. I know Kevin digs it and views a lot of the stuff similarly, maybe with some differences on how the well, I don't know exactly, but I know it's a lot of the similar ideas. But yeah, we can continue on. We might need to be wrapping it up here because I've got a dog who's ready to go crazy, taking him on a walk. It's usually his walk time right now. But awesome. I mean, I thought it was super interesting. It's interesting to learn all the ideas and hear all the things and know that yeah, it's stuff that's in the canon. You know, you can pull this stuff out of the doctrine and the history and all that sort of stuff. And it's interesting to know what people's beliefs and ideas are. And time will get to tell if any of this comes true. We'll get to see it, you know. So they're bold claims, but I wouldn't put money down against them right now. So that's me.
My invite is this. I know there will be a lot of people who listen to this who will never pick up the scriptures and think about what I've said again, right? And that's fine. You don't read the scriptures anyways, to be honest, right? Be honest with yourself. Be honest with me. But those who actually are reading the scriptures, look for this stuff. Look for planetary mentions. Look for catastrophe. Look for the language. Make a list of all language that would imply or talk about catastrophe. And then as you're reading, just note how often it's brought up. It will strengthen your testimony. And I will not seem like a nut the more you read your scriptures and apply this filter. That's my challenge. I mean, I know people who don't believe this stuff are just going to dismiss me, and that's fine. But those of you who are interested, go to the scriptures, go to the spirit, go to the temple with these questions and think and look for these types of signs and symbols. Do the work. And I promise you, and this is why it's so cool, you will experience the same things that I did. You will experience the same understandings level by level, line by line. You'll think things will dawn on you as you're ready to receive them if you keep this and put it in your mind. That's the beauty of this framework, and I can't speak like highly enough of it.
Well, and to back that up a little bit, not that I've read everything, but I've read enough that from the different philosophical, theosophical, Hermeticism, Gnostic ideas, he's not inventing that either. He's not making that up. And the stuff of the old societies and their views and their descriptions, that's not invention either. So it's all stuff that exists in the world and putting it together in a way that makes sense under an LDS worldview. But so many different times, especially as years have gone on, describing Marxist belief or cultural Marxist belief or critical fill-in-the-blank theory belief, and that's stuff that I have read. You go telling people what the stuff says, and then they say, "Hey, you're crazy for saying." No, it's there.
You believe this?
It's there. It's in the stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not the one who's inventing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the stuff, and this stuff is in the stuff of the ancient people. It's in the stuff of those Neoplatonists and the different secret combinational societies and those sorts of ideas. It's not in the literature. So anyway. Oh, and then all that stuff of like Jay Dyer's channel. I mean, it's every other stream. Yeah. You've listened to a bunch of it, Kevin, too. It's too much to even shake a stick at. And Kwaku one time said, and he's right, that there's stuff going in the whole last 100 years that's just endless that we've all barely read, and it's there. It's there, and it's in the belief system of those people who've had the levers of control. And there's been people like Anthony Sutton and Quigley who've kind of depicted how that stuff happened in so many different societies, the Fabian Society, Milnerites, a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. And it's too much for me to eat. Like, I think of it and I think of all the stuff I've listened to and heard and how I couldn't even start to regurgitate it. But that's real too. It all exists. There's too much. And
that's why it's important to, okay, if you've got so much information, how do you choose what you spend your time studying? Yeah. To me, that's why it has to relate to the temple or it's not worth my time. Like I've got to be able to draw a string and a line back to the temple with these things. Otherwise, I know they're just shaking me for my boots, like, or shaking my boots for my money, like kind of thing. Like that's exactly how I take it. So when I see a thread like this one that Guatemax shared with us from Kwaku being critical of the founding fathers, again, to me, my mind immediately just thinks this is some version or diffusion of critical theory that's, again, trying to subvert and take away from the things that I know to be true. Like it's falling for critical theory and pretending you're not is the trap that I see a lot of esoteric people fall into because of that overwhelming amount of material to cover, right? If you're not tethered with your safety line to the temple or the plumb line of the Lord, well, you're going to get lost in some sauce and you're going to conflict with what prophets have said. That's when you know you should revisit what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Well, but then like some of that stuff is just the proofs of the secret combinations, and you could spend 10 years just reading those things.
Yep.
It's just too many. But anyway, so should we wrap this up and get to doing our Saturday tours, Saturday stuffs?
Yeah.
Thank you
All
for this
right.
opportunity, guys.
No, thank you. Thanks
Yeah,
for
thanks, man.
explaining it all.
Yep.
It's interesting
Appreciate it.
stuff. Thanks, Guatemax, again. And
Yeah.
we'll talk some more. We'll do some more stuff.
For sure.
All right. Thanks, guy.
Peace out,
2
guys.
hours and 30 minutes later.
See you guys.
Bye.